Okay.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Let's get it turned over, so it's actually pointed up towards you.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Okay, to my staff.
Looks good, looks good.
Yeah, it's a little off to the side, but
You know, it has been, we've been having trouble hearing you.
Donna, you doing the oath?
Yes.
you got the big boom going on.
And, is Kim doing the vacation rental?
Try to keep
Been in
it
town or out of town?
Look campground.
And the zoning.
Gee, that was playing video, what are they doing?
No, the video's probably.
Right, it's not, it's new money, meaning it's not really budget, even though she was reallocating.
People at home
She
are
might
like,
have a little bit.
this is better than something you come in and watch on TV.
But I verified per your request.
Terrible. Oh, wow, cool. You guys are like Seth and me, you got all kinds of candy and all sorts of stuff.
I'm not so sure that we should move that over to next video.
Oh. You know,
Because we typically have people sitting there.
I don't know what they usually do with that camera, sit.
Usually over there.
Here's the picture. There's the picture.
What about, it's gonna be the people back of people's heads. We're gonna, you know.
Oh, that's right, there will be people sitting.
That's enough power to keep it on most of the time.
And it should last for me.
It should, cause I would think so.
It's just remembering to turn it back on.
I'm getting good.
Okay.
Beautiful now.
Well, yeah, no, you just have to think it.
No, I have to say it.
And I know Susan's coming, cause she picked up her book. Only one, I don't know about Bob, I assume Bob will be here. I'm gonna go ahead and work on our.
That's not really good for that. That's stuff on the mountain, get learned.
What you do, there's some chocolate, there's $2 for that liquor.
Oh, is that right?
Sausage.
Oh, boy.
I mean, you when you, oh God, don't even go there. Bad health.
Mr. Mayor, I saw you walking in with that bowl, I thought it was Halloween.
We have.
You're gonna come in and say trick or treat.
It might be.
Encourage each other. Your neighbor up here.
Yes, sir. So that I don't walk into her.
You say it.
I'll still be running.
With the exception of Susan.
Well, actually,
Everybody put their, oh, there's Susan. Everybody put your mics on, please.
And someone else. I thought it was funny, I mean, not funny. Unfortunately, we don't get to it, but let's just stuff online and I'm like.
We'll go ahead and call the, meeting, the work session of the Madison Springs City Council, June 25th, 2019, to order. Roll call. Present.
Present.
Councilwoman Elder?
I'm here.
Councilwoman Wolver?
Here.
Councilman Laura?
Here.
We'll call item C1, and I would suggest, would like to advise that we have two oaths of office that we're going to do today. One is going to be Chief Priester, and the other is Sergeant Ballard. So, would you like to start us off? Chief, where are you? Sergeant? There you are.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Joseph Reister,
Do affirm
do affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and will faithfully perform the duties
and will faithfully perform the duties
of the Office of Chief of Police,
of the Office of Chief of Police,
upon which I am about to enter,
upon which I am about to enter
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
And Sergeant Ballard.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Alexander Ballard,
Do affirm
do affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and will faithfully perform the duties
and will faithfully perform the duties
of the Office of Police Sergeant,
of the Office of Police Sergeant,
about which I am about to enter,
about which I'm about to enter,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you both of you for
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
all of your service and help. Item 2, short-term, let's see, if I wanted to turn this volume down, can we do that? It sounds like it's designed to make it Mike?
I got you.
You're actually doing it from there? So we can't do that. In other words, independently, it's all done from the app. Okay. Short-term visitation, rental ordinance, community engagement process. Ms. Johnson?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and the public. So this is kind of a follow-up from, earlier this year when the council, considered a level of engagement worksheet related to the short-term rental ordinance update. I've included, the city council, worksheet that has the author Kim Johnson, planning director on it. And then I have the planning commission, worksheet which has the author as the planning commission. Basically, since this has been to the city council, it has been to the, community engagement and governance work group. And that group has talked about the worksheet, talked about the process. We've gotten some input from, at least one council member on potential, members of the public that might wanna be, that might be good for serving on the planning team to plan the public engagement process. And it sort of came up, I mentioned to the Community Engagement and Governance Work Group that the Planning Commission was not overly excited about the prospect of opening up the whole the whole short-term rental ordinance. And the group decided, well, maybe we should see what the Planning Commission thinks as far as a worksheet. So we had them do a worksheet at their last meeting. I do apologize because this issue has been put off a couple of times. It got put off at a couple of CEGW meetings due to other higher priority projects that we were potentially going to work on, and then it got put off at Planning Commission, a couple of meetings, one due to weather and one due to low attendance. So anyway, we're finally, what I feel like, trying to get this moving a little bit further, a little faster. And so basically, as you can see in your packet, the Planning Commission agreed on many items that the City Council had identified as issues that should be discussed. I highlighted the things in yellow are the things that are, really different or new that the Planning Commission added, and then the Planning Commission did leave out some things and they consolidated a few things. I would say probably the newest thing in this Planning Commission worksheet is funding for the project. We had talked about up to a $5,000 project cost. That was related to the engagement process, notification materials, things of that nature. But as it's been discussed, staff had sought out estimated costs for some of the ordinance projects that are sort of on our to-do list. And so we did get an estimate from the consultant that we used for the Planning for Hazards project. They estimated actually higher than $20,000 for assistance with this project. But because Kono is actually gonna do the community engagement for us and we have numbers on that, I brought that estimate down. Also, we're not exactly sure of the extent of need that we're gonna have for a planning consultant, so I would want to do any agreement on sort of more of an hourly basis or a as needed basis if we possibly could. So that's kind of the biggest one. I don't think there's any real huge divergence on sort of the main issues. I think all of the main issues were sort of agreed upon, so I can go through them or you can just talk about it and I can respond to anything you have or questions.
Council, what's your pleasure? Questions? Kim, maybe you can spend a little bit more time telling us what the consultant would actually do.
Well, so one of the concerns is that, the things that have come up about this are, is the 500-foot separation appropriate to be sort of whole scale applied to the community? Should we look at maybe applying it in different areas differently, a lesser separation in areas where the lots are smaller, those kinds of things. And so they could help with some of that analysis. They could certainly help with some expertise related to vacation home rentals in general and trends and kind of what other communities and things are thinking about and doing and how they're handling some of these unique questions that we've come up with. The other thing is I think it would be helpful to just have some of that expertise to just help us through the process. We've kind of kept an eye on the Colorado Springs process. They're doing it in-house. They've had a lot of problems. They've had to really kind of go back and do some more research and sort of, and I just don't think we have the time or the depth of staff to do some of that research and provide some of that expertise on that specific subject.
So do you envision, because as this item first came up, it was really tweaking the ordinance.
Well, it was. Staff's recommendation was just to clarify a few things.
Right.
But then as it was discussed by the city council and really our planning commission as well, there were some questions that came up, because people have brought up the issue of, the 500-foot separation. Is the total number, is that the right number for our community? We don't have all of our licenses occupied. we have a number of people that call periodically that, you know, want to do one and they can't because of the separation. And so, you know, there was some thought is maybe we should look at that and see, you know, is that the right total number and are our requirements for the separation appropriate?
Council, any thoughts, comments, questions?
Kim, could you clarify what you started out with, that I'm not sure I heard you correctly, Planning Commission was nervous about opening it up to a community?
Yeah, well, not necessarily to a community process. Their concern was more that they had spent a great deal of time, working on this project 2-3 years ago. And they felt that it was a good ordinance. They didn't feel it was necessarily broken. There were a few things that needed to be clarified, such as how to measure that 25-foot, or that, 500-foot separation, a few definitions, those kinds of things, but they didn't, you know, feel that it was necessary when we initially talked about it. And I just brought that up to CEGW. And so, but when we did talk about it, as they went through the council worksheet and filled out their own worksheet, they did agree with several, things that the council had talked about and that were brought up by the public. And these aren't just planning commission ideas or city council ideas, some of them have been brought up by the public as well.
Questions, comments, how would you like to proceed? If I understand correctly, your request is for, primarily for the $20,000, the other money, $2,100 would come from the community engagement line item, if I understand correctly, and the $20,000 would need to be allocated in our mid-year budget at some point.
That is correct, and I have submitted that as part of the mid-year budget adjustment. I did take a look at my budget. I see I didn't bring it here with me, but, you know, budget for this year was pretty lean. There are some funds for, development review and for engineering services. There may be some monies left in that line item. It's just really hard to tell kind of where we're gonna be going. We do have some, very interesting and potentially, complex developments that, could potentially be on the horizon. We're not sure when they would start, but they would, require a degree of, staff assistance with development review from an engineering perspective, as well. So, you know, it's hard to tell where we're gonna be by the end of the year.
Council?
I have a perspective on this, which is, we draw an analogy to what happened with the marijuana ordinance, coincidentally, also passed 4 years ago, 3 voters voted. We concluded this year that we would basically ratify what was established at that time, because we were still in some state of developing that industry and developing the relationship between its finances and the city's finances. By analogy, I see the same thing true with short-term rentals, which is 4 years old. We have not really stabilized in terms of what's the occupancy rates of those short-term rentals versus occupancy rates in hotels, what's our hotel capacity. These are the kinds of things that, as you were stating, the need for outside expertise, this is kind of beyond the scope of the depth that we have as a small community. Other questions come up, which is, how does this influence the prices of houses? You know, a big unknown there. Another question comes up, how does this affect, what do we call it, appropriate housing or affordable housing, whatever those things are. And then we got the big global question, are we a tourist community or are we a residential community? And where are we going with that, with our school district and with our community assets and so forth. So, in a way, we're not at the capacity that we've authorized. So, in some sense, while I can understand the need to open this up a lot, I'm not sure how far we really will benefit by doing that versus kind of like back to the beginning of, you know, a narrow technical scoping where there's some misunderstandings in the current ordinance. That's just a view of what I said.
Do you have, which one might you be advocating for? More narrow technical review or the more comprehensive one?
Well, I don't know how we can do a sweep through and get the questions like, how many housing units should we have? What should the separation be? What should the impact be on neighborhoods?
advocating for that approach as opposed to a more technical, more narrow approach? That's what I'm asking.
Claude, I'm just supporting the idea that this is, wading into this is $20,000, or who knows how many thousands of dollars, or how many experts will be required. If you look around the community, there's a lot of literature about communities now having second guesses about where they're at, and having to deal with that particular challenge. The good news about Manitou is we got a little later into the game, so we can learn by what happened to the early adopters. A lot of the early adopters are not, communities are having really trouble getting their fabric together while they've, what's the term, overextended themselves with short-term rentals. And particularly, little gems like Manitou. I mean, we are a gem. We're part of a metropolitan district with a huge amount of housing, a huge amount of public transportation, people can get around in various corners and crannies.
So, council, how would you like to proceed? I think at this point, Kim's looking for some direction from council about the proposal to extend, the new proposal would be to extend $20,000 and follow the guidance that was set out in the planning commission worksheet.
My ward is one of the subsidies on that side of the street. Historically, we've had this particular, and it's consumed their community. It's driven up the prices of houses to an unbelievable level. It's changed the fabric of that community. And I don't think we want to go there. I don't want to go there. But I also want to listen to my ward when they say they'd like a review of whether or not applying one thing to the whole city is the right thing for my ward. Number two, the way we measure, is that the best way to measure? I'm not taking a stand on this. This is one of the things I've heard about in my 18 months the most from my ward. It's really just because of what my ward consists of. Tons, I live near Duclos. Duclos is 3 or 4 deep. So you drive by Duclos and you're like, oh, there's like 6 houses. No, it's not like that.
So Susan, are you, back to the process, I think what we're trying to address is, are you supportive of moving forward with the process as outlined?
I think so, based on the worksheet I saw from planning that deals with these very specific issues. I think it could give my ward more information, more time to be heard. I think that's what they would like on this process. I agree that this is, with both Kim and Bob basically said this is really big. It's bigger than these small issues because depending on what we do, it can change our community. But I do want my ward to have the benefit of looking at this one more time. And I think it benefits the whole town since we're not at capacity, and I don't think it puts us into territory that we can't get out of. So I'd be for this.
Including the use of funds.
It pains me, but I think we need to do it.
Alright, great.
Is it worth doing, we've got 2 to 4 community meetings proposed. So is it worth doing some more of a needs assessment, having 1 or 2 of those meetings up front, doing a needs assessment to find out how large the community issues might be? Because I completely agree on the fabric of the community and not letting this inherently change us. So just as a compromise, do 1 or 2 community meetings to get how big the problem is, because it may be that the community's fine with just tweaking it somewhat. I don't know.
So supportive moving forward as outlined by Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I just don't know if we need the whole zoning thing.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You want us to do a few community engagement meetings, see if we can identify the issues, and then if the issues are where we need to really open it up and do a lot of research and analysis, then we would have to proceed with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would certainly not spend the money if I didn't think I needed it. My only concern about doing that is that then I have to go out for an RFP, and that process takes some time.
Yeah.
But
As opposed to,
well, I'd have to do an RFP regardless, but I could do that right away instead of do some and then wait for that. But
you would do an RFP.
well,
Either
I
way.
feel like I probably would want to. We don't have a professional services agreement. I mean, we need to get some bids anyway, and so.
My sense is that the issue is so complex that if it goes beyond just a couple of tweaks, we would need, I mean, especially with the Housing Advisory Board engaged, hopefully they could really assist in some of the things that they're looking for as well. But, yeah, so that's where I am.
Okay, so supportive. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Supportive.
Okay.
I think that we shouldn't waste, it's so much research, I don't wanna waste your time when you have other stuff going on. I don't think that one size fits all is the way we should have gone in the first place in exploring other communities and what they've done would be a wise idea. But everybody's done it differently. It's gonna take a lot of research, and somebody who's done it or knows what they're doing specific in that area would be good now.
Yeah, I'd like to support Kim and what she says she needs, but I really wanna make sure that we need it. Some of those people are in my neighborhood too, and the 500-foot is not really clear. Does it go through the trees or is it on the street? I mean, how is it measured? And you're 500 foot from another one that you can't see, you can't hear, it's on the other side of the hill, and so I think that needs to be addressed. I know it's important to the people who want that. They want the money, I mean, it's good money, you can't deny that. And then the rest of the community who doesn't necessarily want that. So I think it's important to look at it carefully. And, you know, if Kim thinks she needs some money, I would be inclined to let it to her.
Okay, Councilman Smith?
I guess I would, I see the need, I just would like for your approval. You know, come back less than $20,000.
All right. Sounds like a consensus of the council is to move forward, to suggest the allocation of up to $20,000 seems to be appropriate. I think the council is suggesting, as you heard, to be frugal. It sounds like you're gonna put out an RFP and that presumably we would pay this on an hourly or some other basis and not to exceed, let's say, that amount. Okay, that summarizes what we've got. Okay.
I have one more thing that I'd like to add, is that in the memo, we listed 3 people who are potentially going to be part of the community engagement process, as part of the project planning team. But in our community engagement meetings, we did talk about recruiting maybe 1 or 2 others. Did we not agree on that? Mainly because I think this group of people in this memo all have short-term rentals. And we're looking for also someone who doesn't have one. Because that would be important input to have in the project planning team. So just to recap, one of them has a lot of experience with B&Bs and short-term rentals. One's relatively new to the game. I'm not sure about the third one, but that person's been on council before, so they have that background too. But we had talked in our meeting about bringing in somebody who doesn't have one, doesn't have any interest in having one, is more looking at it from the neighborhood perspective to help guide the community engagement, because that's all these people are doing.
That's
It's
all.
just
That
guiding
needs to be
the
spelled
engagement.
out 100% clear in big, bold type. The planning team is not making decisions regarding this issue. They're not influencing the decisions, they're influencing the process to bring the community together. Are we, everybody,
Yeah.
that's good, that's clear?
Yeah.
So we just need to make that clear. These people, you know, think, wow, how come this person's on or that person's on? They are not making the decisions, they're just organizing, helping to organize the process.
Right, and I'm happy with the 3 people who have agreed to do this, but I really think we need that person who doesn't have that particular skin in the game, but they have this, you know, the community, I just wanna live here thing.
And we haven't approached any of these people yet, we're, you know,
Right.
so we can certainly do that, and then we would also be made up of, planning commission and HAB members,
That'd be great.
And that might cover it as well, I
which
just
might
wanted to
also
make
cover it.
sure that anybody who's reading this memo doesn't look at that and go, wait, there's nobody on here but owners and short-term rental. And these people have been contacted to indicate whether they'd be interested at all, but that's as far as it's gone.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anything
Thank
else?
you. Thank you.
Another Ms. Johnson. We'll call item 3, lighting ideas for Manitou Springs.
So, let's see. Well, I guess to start, with, I feel like, so about 4 years ago, I feel like as a community, we were trying to figure out holiday lighting.
No, 1 second, just wanted to confirm, and I forgot to do it last time, we have about 15 minutes for the topic, does that seem like it will be enough?
So 4 years ago, no, no, but basically, you know, the outlets weren't working at the base of the trees, we were trying to figure out what to do, the creative district kind of took this on, we decided to figure out ways to kind of support lighting through the lampposts instead of through the trees, because we'd already invested like $200,000 fixing the outlets in the base of the trees, and they kept breaking, and blah, blah, blah. So then, I was sort of charged with trying to figure out how to manage holiday lighting. For the last 3 years, we've been, you know, sort of working with different companies, and it's come to about $60,000 a year for the downtown, and then we've been working with the URA and the URA portion. And so 3 years in, it has felt like it has always felt like a lot of money, but it has felt like we should consider other options moving forward. And that idea, I think, would be to sort of begin investing in permanent lighting that, again, we could sort of systemically place over the years to create the holiday lighting or lighting effect we want, but it wouldn't cost the same amount of money every year. So I've sort of been doing all of this independently, which is why I'm sort of here today, is for that idea to kind of let you know what I've learned and then kind of figure out what next steps look like and how we sort of move forward with that. We can continue to do what we're doing now, which is fine with this ongoing sort of $60,000 a year, but I think we should consider other things too. So I've been reaching out to different folks and just conversations and asking for ideas, and a lot of them have been like, oh, wrap some rope lighting around a lamppost, and it's not been very inspirational. And so oddly enough, I was talking about mobility with some of the mobility study folks, and they said, oh, we have folks at Kimley Horn that have done this for cities all throughout the country, and could we throw together some ideas for you? And so that's sort of what I have today, is just this sort of idea, these idea boards that they put together. And this first one is again sort of this idea of a public art design competition. I know. There was not, I couldn't, anyway, which one do we have up? We can go with whatever's up.
But I'll go to yours, I'll just go to yours.
Okay. So that idea, I think, would be something along the lines of, like, public art is expensive, so I don't know if it would be, like, some of these on the left would be sort of, they would change out every year, it'd be some sort of a contest, but I'm guessing, you know, that tree was probably $150,000. So the other option would be sort of on the right. You can kind of look at this idea of this sort of ongoing investment, maybe one sculpture a year, that would have some sort of a lighting effect, and we could sort of accumulate these sculptures or this artwork that could be illuminated and create an effect over time. So again, there could be sort of an annual competition, or there could be some sort of a long-term investment in an infrastructure that would have that lighting effect to it. This one is just this idea, this permanent lighting idea, upward lighting, and so you've seen this before, but again, a lot of it is just done with the effect of uplighting things. This is a less expensive option, but again, due to our outlets and things along those lines, there would still be an investment in that piece. But just that idea that we can play with this as well. I think what we'd be looking at as we look at different things is sort of combining a number of options depending on location and what's happening. But this is just another thing to consider, is sort of that just using upward lighting in some way to visually impact an area. And then path-based lighting, again, some of that is actually embedded into the sidewalks themselves. You can see that on the right-hand corner with the bioluminescent lighting. And then, as we sort of see more typically in some communities, sort of the lighting going across the street. This is something that we could potentially be impactful along a place like Canyon, that kind of thing. And so, so again, just another way to sort of visually illuminate an area. It's not a great, but in the lower sort of left-hand corner too, there's lighting that's sort of been installed or is part of walls. So he was sort of looking at some of our historic walls, lighting those, some of our stairways, that kind of a thing too. So, so those were just some ideas that that have sort of come to light. No, but you know, that I've been working with, and I do think that anything we go forward with, we have to be really considerate of the fact that we have a lot of traditions in the community, and a lot of that does involve, you know, holiday lighting, lighting up the trees, sort of, impact that we have offered for decades, and then what it would look like to sort of transition to something else. So I think we are talking about potentially a decade of sort of transition and what that would look like. But we could move faster. But I just think it's that balance of really determining what our residents really look forward to every year, and then that idea of us sort of sustainably and I would say and sort of investing in something so that we're not continually putting forth that much money annually toward this process. And so I just kind of wanted to reach out to all of you. I'm going to be presenting to the chamber as well, but that idea of beginning that conversation about what sort of permanent lighting versus our current situation looks like.
So is it fair to say we don't know at this point, even from looking at those boards, what a permanent lighting installation might cost?
Yeah, it would probably be, so based on what we do right now, so the 60,000, if we were to recreate that exact thing, would probably be 3 times that amount, right, for permanent. So we'd just be looking for a higher quality, everything, something that could sustain, weather, all of those types of things. So, so to recreate a holiday scene, I would say we'd be somewhere in that neighborhood, right, of, 180,000 or something. But, that's not the effect I think that we would like year round, the lampposts, being wrapped and that kind of thing. So we'd have to be, again, so it's a different, we're looking at something that can be used year round, so it's gonna have a different look and feel, but would have the same sort of impact when we needed it, or an impact, whether it's, could be changed annually around the holidays, or whether it's something that, is just, I guess, I don't know if we wanna, if it's amazing year round, I don't think it has that, we'd have to have those conversations, but yeah, we couldn't apply exactly what we have budgeted right now and get something permanent right now with that same amount of money.
Is it a chicken or an egg thing, chicken and an egg, whatever, with the businesses? Because as a resident, I love the lighting, especially this year. It was just delightful, and it really helped put me in the Christmas spirit. However, you get downtown and there's nothing open. And even as a resident, I'd love to spend more time downtown and take visitors down there, quite honestly, in the evening. So what's going on with looking at?
I do think that it's a chicken and egg. It's not really chicken and egg. I think if you build it, businesses will stay open if it benefits them monetarily to do that. I think, so one, we do have to sort of create that, and so maybe that is, again, offering things in the evening that are bringing people, and then businesses, it's tricky, but you're right. If you're gonna pay staff to stay open late, you can only try it for a certain period of time before you can't continue to do that, and if you're just doing it yourself, you're just exhausted, right? And so it's kind of that piece, but I do believe that if we can create that energy and people are coming, the businesses will open.
What specifically, what direction, or what are you looking for in terms of?
I guess, from all of you, it's just, a matter of, one, should we continue with this process of doing this research? Should we begin reaching out to the community and having conversations around what are the most meaningful bits of the holiday season that we wanna keep, and what things can we change and look at, or what things do you enjoy in other communities that we could potentially offer here? Just that idea of that, I guess, next step, what community engagement looks like. In terms of funding, is the city, gonna continue to offer that? Obviously we can't speak for other councils, but, that 30,000, is that something that we can consider as we're trying to figure out, how to pay for things, how to transition, what does that look like? At this point, I don't think, there's any need for us to hire a consultant to put together anything. I think that that's something that even Kimley Horn was like, I think, there's enough out there that we can work with. So I don't feel like we're asking for that piece right now, unless we feel like we need to at some point, but, at this point, I think it really is just beginning the conversation, really, because up to this point, like I was joking with Ken, it's been me in a room with some posters.
You and Kimley Horn folks.
Yeah.
Thoughts questions? Presumably our $30,000, the $30,000 from last year is allocated again in this year's budget?
Right now, we just have 15, so I have
15.
asked for an additional 15 in the mid-year budget, cause everyone was given half of what they asked for.
And you had asked for 30 and we gave 15.
Correct, but I have already requested that they include a request for 15, so that at this point, we're scheduled, if we can get that additional 15, we're scheduled to do exactly what we did last year. If we don't get that 15, we are gonna have to cut, a quarter of what we offered last year, and we have to have that conversation, but.
And the chamber is contributing the
Thirty.
rest last year?
And then the URA took care of the URA area, which of course would transition over time too, so.
Folks?
I would love to hear what the chamber feels, and then based on maybe some of that feedback, maybe some community engagement with the general public and residents about bringing the businesses and the residents together. I'd like to hear more from the businesses that are downtown. Not that they're the most important, but I think they're the next logical step. And I think, if you think about Larimer Square in Denver, people love that. I love that. But I don't know how sustainable it is, how expensive it is. I just know I love it. So
It is funny walking around, like lighting,
It
be like,
is.
that was $400,000, that was,
Yeah,
I mean, it's like I have a whole
it's
different
probably
way of looking,
mind-blowing,
yeah.
so, but I'd like to, have some more input about what creates that magic for people.
I was just gonna say, I think that what you did last year was great. I mean, that added to the town, as Nancy said, to the Christmas, putting people in the Christmas spirit, and I heard a lot of positives on it, where it was good, so. I would like to see personally, if, we can save money and do something permanent, that'd be great, but I think what we're doing right now is probably a benefit to the community that we do. I mean, I like it, so.
It has a certain feel, right? It's something permanent, but it wouldn't look the same, wouldn't be the same.
We have to figure out what
On the other hand, you have something year round, look at the Empire State Building, do cool stuff with their colors in the Empire State Building all the time. So, keep exploring if you have time.
Keep exploring, continue on the path to at least have the holiday part of it.
Well,
We don't do anything in the
At this
meantime.
point, the holiday light
Holiday.
is a done deal for this year, just because.
We're
Pretty
already
much, yes.
working on
Yeah.
contracts and things, but, we could
But
announce
thinking-
something, launch something, it's not.
But thinking now about what we want in the future is certainly appropriate.
I think I would be really just appalled at having something like that year round. After a while, you don't see it. Your visitors might see it, but to me, and I guess with the passing of Rocky, it kind of makes me nostalgic for what we used to do, which was the fire department and the little things across the that was many years ago. But most of the stuff leaves me cold. I don't mind the trees being lit, and I have to take issue with you on the URA. I got feedback on that. It's like a landing strip again, it's just pull after pull after pull. And there's no trees there, so it's cold. And then you drive through the URA, and then you drive into nothing. It's just like, no lights, anything, we're not celebrating holidays like on Crystal Park Road, because, you know what I mean, can we like take off 50% of those pool lights and maybe do something to connect the URA to the downtown, so you keep that feeling as you go? And I know you're probably expecting this from me, but, yeah, I don't think permanent, you can have permanent lighting that isn't on.
And I do agree, I don't think any of these are an exact fit with
God.
Manitou, they're ideas from
Well,
other
and there's
people.
dark sky people in town that really wanna get up and say, can we not have so much flashing? Cause we're losing our, somebody was saying, everything's for the main street and there's nothing on the back streets. And not that we want lighting on the back streets, we just wanna have our town. The other thing that gives me an opportunity to bring this up is that the town clock, the spruce tree, looks incredibly sick, and it's got a lot of dead on the west side, and you might not have a tree next year to put lights on, and to me, that's a better place to invest our money. It's like, let's get some trees in the URA that we could actually put lights on, So it would harmonize with downtown and not just look like you're, you know, walking through a mall or something. I don't even know how to describe it. But, you know, I love you, Natalie, and I want you to keep looking because, you know, I can't go for this. And I am one who's really appalled by the amount of money we're spending on stuff like that. So there's, you know, let's do popcorn strings and let the birds eat or something. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Gary?
Just
You weighed in, I think.
Just a quick creative idea. The whole idea here is to draw people to downtown in a certain way, make it more friendly. When I had 5 weeks off or whatever it was, one of the advantages of that was seeing a lot of the East and West Coast. And something really struck me. A number of communities are doing now, closing their main street one weekday of the week, and really making downtown a celebratory place, maybe putting up a laser light show or stuff like that, that is almost become a tradition in a number of places where they know exactly, coming into the good weather, what event is gonna be, whatever they've got in terms of their rotating schedule, and really drawing people that are like, oh, you know, encounter them, say, oh, you know, I wanna go to that event, cause it's whatever it is. Just a thought that maybe creative energy on this and cost of this. Just a thought.
Okay, so you're saying a different experience once a week as opposed to, or the infrastructure supports doing something one day a week or something.
Right. Permanent structure might be a laser light show, but you have a totally different theme happening on the street. The people can pack away 24 say, oh, there's Manitou again, it's Wednesday night.
Some disagreement about what the rest might need in next year unless a suitcase of money falls on us. So that's probably an important parameter to consider, because I suspect if you come to us with a price tag much bigger than that, it would be challenging. So just to keep that in mind would be my guess. Does that summarize the conversation? Does that give you a little bit of direction?
It does.
Okay. Anything else?
And more people know, because it's just me.
All right, and more people know. But thank you for doing the work, even though it's been lonely at times. Thank you for doing that. All right.
Alright, so I'm gonna set this here and then I'm gonna grab mine.
Great, we'll call the next item, which is Natchez Springs Broadband Initiative. I'll note that we have 20 minutes allocated to this. I don't think we're going to do justice to this topic in 20 minutes, but perhaps a 20-30 minute time frame might be appropriate. Maybe we can narrow down what the critical issues are that we need to deal with tonight, because there's an awful lot in that memo that we need to deal with.
Well, there's
I would ask that if you might, and I think it would be even helpful for this document itself, if you could amend that document to put on a date and author.
Oh, yes.
A little hard to know where it came from.
Good point, yes. And so, yeah, so it's from John Merritt with HR Green.
All right, we guessed that.
And then the date.
If you could just amend that at some point
Yep,
so that we have a record of where it came from and who did it, we need to follow up with it.
Okay, well, there's one thing that we can actually cross off here to some degree, is the, to manage the 5G and small cell installations. Kim has been working on that, and they're moving forward with design guidelines for that. So that's something that I think, I don't know what the timeline is. I don't know what the time, for the 5G piece, I mean, you know, we're probably maybe a couple months away, but Jeff Parker's already reviewed it, you have it.
So we have a draft.
Hold on one second, let's make sure that we're capturing, first of all, Natalie, if you could bring that microphone closer, and Kim, if you wanna come up so that we can capture, we're gonna really try hard
pushed in,
to get our audio to where people can actually hear it that are watching, in case anybody's watching this.
So I apologize, I jumped ahead just to cancel something, to cross it.
Well, that's good, because we're trying to narrow it down, so eliminating is something we have to talk about, although there may be some people here who wanna talk about the 5G issue, I think. Yeah, so
we have been working with the city attorney, we do have a preliminary draft, we have not reviewed it yet in our office. I think, I put together sort of a draft list of ordinances and kind of a timeline, and I think I've identified it for, September, maybe on a timeframe.
let me ask you this, do we need a moratorium of any sort? Are we at any risk that someone will come in and try to?
I'm not sure that we can do a moratorium, to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor. There are some pretty stringent FCC regulations related to these types of facilities. We can regulate them in certain ways. I did reach out to Jeff when I found out this was gonna be on the agenda tonight, but we weren't able to connect today. But I don't think we can do a moratorium.
Okay.
So I think we can deal with it aesthetically, we may be able to do some co-location requirements, but I don't think there's a lot we can do to say that you can't have these facilities in our community.
So then the question is how quickly we need to do some of those things that we might want to consider.
So we have, wireless, facility regulations, but what I will tell you is that, in looking at the regulations for the, 5G, we discovered that somewhere along the line, a conditional use permit requirement for large cell facilities fell out of the ordinance, so right now they are all permitted uses. And so that's another reason why we haven't quite completed this, is because we said to Jeff, we need to fix this issue. Because any new cell towers, large facilities really should be a conditional use permit. And so we're working on that element as well, so we have found some other things in the ordinance that need a little bit of tweaking, and that's why we're still working on it.
So are you suggesting that that's gonna be an in-house project and that the suggestion here, to allocate additional funds wouldn't be necessary for that, just that portion of it?
I would say that, it was our intent to do this in-house, but if we get to a situation where we need some highly technical information or analytical information, I'm not sure that, I'm not a cell service expert, so, I can't say that we would need some assistance.
Let me get some feedback from council about the urgency of this, and I just don't know how quickly the industry is pushing us, but what's your sense of the urgency and whether we wanna get ahead of this as opposed to react when someone says, I wanna do this in your town?
There was a timeline that HR Green put out, it was April, that we had to do something by, I don't recall what we did, if anything. But this is in line with that law, federal law, I don't think it's state law, it's federal.
It was an FCC thing, I believe, and it basically was just saying, we're putting you guys on notice that if you wanna get some regulations in place, you have until this date, until these regulations go into effect, which limits our ability, to regulate them in some ways. I don't think we've missed the boat on anything, it's just that we don't have the aesthetic provisions in our code yet, so if someone comes forward now, we just have to let them do what they need to do. So we did start working on it though, but the city attorney did point out that it's not like we're missing out on an opportunity, it's just that.
Is there a deadline by which we would miss out? Okay. Yes.
There's a group of citizens that have organized against this, and they would like to create a haven from 5G in Manitou. They're actually, we're looking at a movie tomorrow night, a documentary, I can't remember the name of it. But it's a relatively new one, and so this isn't this. I mean, we accept these things in our culture, like we accepted Monsanto and Roundup, and then you find out 30 years later you don't want to do that. I've not seen this documentary, but I'm concerned just by what people are telling me, and people that I know and love and trust, and ask me if I trust industry that's doing everything for money. I don't. So I think if there's something we can do to empower ourselves to say, yay or nay, or no, we don't want that. Certainly we want to get the conditional use on so we don't get towers everywhere. And there might be some conspiracy theory out there, because that always pops up too. Like, everybody's gonna go bald, and I haven't heard that, but, I want some time to study this rather than just accept it, that this is good for us. Just like GMOs, they're good for us. Well, I don't necessarily believe that. So, I don't know how to bring that into the community, because I think it's not just a given that this is great. I mean, how fast do our computers have to be? Good Lord.
So I think what, one of the first questions is what we can legally do.
That's what I would like
And
to
so I
find
think
out.
we need to get that
And I think
direction.
the conditional use that Kim referred to, we absolutely need to get Jeff on that, so that we're not overwhelmed, because we know that more money will come in and do whatever they want unless we have protected ourselves. And I really wanna see us protect ourselves from that. We might, in the end, go, oh yeah, this is great, we're gonna get 10G. We're all gonna go hairless. Whatever it is, I wanna at least have all of our ducks in a row so that we have some power in the face of something that's bigger than us. And Manitou is a haven. What are we a haven from? So, this should be something that
So your
maybe
specific,
we use the public engagement on.
your specific suggestion is to move forward to research, find out what we can and cannot do.
Get with Jeff and let's see what we can do to at least empower ourselves. And I'm gonna see this movie tomorrow night. It's a private showing in private residence by private people who are very upset about this. But perhaps we can do a public showing. I mean, I wanna go see it and make sure it's not like everybody's going bald.
Anybody else wanna weigh in on this topic?
I'd say we need to move forward and see what we need to do.
Okay? And we're just talking about the managing the 5G small cell at the moment. Anybody else wanna weigh in on that?
Just next week while Jeff's here, can you just give us a quick briefing on what variables we do have to play with?
Okay.
We just have that base.
Why would we want to do that? Mr. Laddie, we're just talking about the process, not the specifics. Do you have any question, any comment about the process? We're trying not to talk about the specifics at the moment.
Yeah.
Public
Did I
comment.
come up or here?
Is it something about the process, Mr. Laddie?
Yes, yes.
Real quickly, please.
Yeah, the thought comes to me that we have an environmental working group in town, staffed by very capable engineers and scientists. I have concerns that Councilor Elder has. And I also wanted to let you know, I heard at a mobility study meeting, pretty much what I'm hearing here is that we don't have any legal authority to do what we might like to do.
All right, so your comment is to get some additional input, perhaps the environmental sustainability work group may have some expertise, and we should probably act on that. Does that cover that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comment? All right, let's go back. So that takes care of the 5G issue. And I don't know if we're gonna get to all of these other recommendations, but.
I think that the most important one that I see is that, so we had a meeting on May 14th, Leo was there, with a number of folks who, particularly Verizon and Zayo, who are interested in installing conduit through Manitou. And some of the applications went in October, and things have just kind of stopped. Like, we don't really have the ordinances in place, we don't really have a process in place, and I think that it came out of this meeting that Manitou needs to figure out what we want and how to support that, and we don't really have that yet. And so I think that with some of these applications that are kind of hanging out there.
When you say application for what?
To install conduit, so their designs and.
So someone has submitted a formal application to put some conduit through town.
Yep, I was on a couple of occasions now.
Okay.
And
what are we doing with those applications?
I think
We're sitting
they're
on them.
file, yeah. Like anything is happening with them.
And we're lucky because they've been very patient with us.
Okay.
And so I think part of it is that, again, we don't have that person that can kind of review it and advocate on our behalf as well as their behalf and sort of help these things happen. So we're just sort of stuck. And so that's something where I would really love support from John Merritt of HR Green to potentially help us manage some of these projects.
All right, so that's the next question before us, is do we wanna allocate, what I'm hearing from this proposal is up to $7,500 to provide services to oversee the design and installation of co-located conduit.
And obviously it's a work session.
Right. General thoughts on moving forward with some co-location effort, and how do we best do that?
I think it's positive.
Okay. Becky?
I think I understand this correctly. The first conduit that goes in will be paid for by a commercial entity, MCI Verizon. And by giving them the right to do that, then they have to collate what's going to be a $3 cost per foot mantua conduit. That's great. Okay?
Yeah, but I would like one other thing, and that is, we've had a lot of interface with HR Green, and I'd kind of like to see what all we've paid and what all we've gotten to date from them.
And so he did do a bit of that in that first piece, and I don't know if it's really clear, but, let's see, so the big one is they've worked with the URA on that portion, and that's, again, that project's 90% complete, and that was paid by the URA for that conduit. And then that second piece, we haven't been billed for yet, but that is that 48,000 that, essentially, we have the conduit that runs along Highway 24, which is gonna help us get to that gigapop, and then out to Woodland Park. So, again, those are the two pieces. We haven't paid that 48,000, but we have it, in the budget. And then, I would say that the city has personally paid HR Green probably about $5,000 for their services.
But I'd like to kind of see that laid out.
So it sounds like there's consensus to move forward with the co-location item, and then, I don't know about the last one, but the community broadband concept?
You mean like, well, at some point, if we do wanna do that, that we've talked about a feasibility study before, that's sort of hanging out there, at some point, I think we do need to have a community conversation around how we wanna manage or use our conduit and fiber once we have that sort of base.
So we don't have to have that discussion tonight necessarily.
No.
I would note that I don't recall, and council weigh in here, my recollection is different than everybody else's. I don't recall that council gave the direction to study the creation of a municipal utility. Does anybody recall that we gave that direction? That's what's noted here. Council set a direction to study the creation of a municipal utility.
I feel like we had that conversation at one point, maybe during the mid-year budget,
was an option.
but it was never, we never moved forward
We
with
never
it.
gave the direction.
That never moved, there was never
He
funding.
presented, here's one option, municipal utility, and so on and so on, so that should be corrected, unless I misunderstood it.
No.
Anybody think that we gave direction to create a municipal utility?
This may be a variation. We just agreed we needed to do it in time for, in advance of these, optics going live.
We need to decide how we wanted to proceed, but that
Correct.
us operating as a utility wasn't the option that we chose at that time.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
very
It was one of 3 or 4 options that he presented. Okay, so let's get that corrected, that we are still at the stage of evaluating the options, one of which is the utility.
And the other thing we have to keep in mind is we have, although it hasn't been executed yet, a Comcast franchise agreement.
Right.
So we have that
So-
piece in that process.
So what, also with that, I know we were discussing with that, and you brought in that 30-inch water main that was abandoned, where we.
We've never, we still haven't signed off on that, I've kind of reached forward, but I would say that, most of these folks, I would say would rather put in their own piece, and so again, that would have to be,
Sounds like something lighter.
Just no more.
Okay.
Batteries are
The only reason I asked, cause there was a person asked me the other day about it.
yeah, and we still haven't, but I do think that again, I think that John could encourage these folks to use that conduit, but I think if we
If it would
don't
be-
encourage that, I think that.
If it's in the right area and
Yeah.
everything else, so.
But it actually is, it's in a good place.
Okay, so under community broadband, we're gonna correct that memo
Mhm.
that indicates we have not made a decision about or set the direction. We're gonna hold off unless anybody wants to allocate $60,000 specifically for that study. It doesn't sound like we need to do that. We've talked about the co-location, we've talked about the 5G.
And this is just something that John and Dave love to talk about, is that idea of, owning our own streetlights instead of renting them from CSU. I think it's just a pet peeve of theirs,
Okay,
so it's just something to consider.
I'm meeting with the head of CSU tomorrow. I'll just ask him if he would just give those to us.
It's more than just a pet peeve.
No, it's true, no, I guess I shouldn't say that, I guess it's
Yeah.
something that they definitely feel passionate about, I feel like they've
Well,
mentioned.
they do, because if you're gonna have 5G and those things have to go somewhere, that you can rent your own phone poles. If we don't own our phone poles, we can't get any rent for them if that is a place where they're gonna go. And they're a great place to go because there's no electricity there, so.
Phone or lighting poles?
Lighting
This was talking
poles.
about lighting.
Lighting poles, sorry. So it's a part and parcel of what they're looking at, big picture.
But then long term, I think we need to look at, you know, how, if we were to own them, how are we going to maintain them?
Well, they don't think that side of it, they just look at the front side.
But
Anybody want to move forward with that? It's what they're indicating is a $9,700 budget item to analyze the streetlight system. We're prepared to move forward with that discussion. Bruno, real quick.
Yes, just so you know, there is a bunch of conduits which are available under Manitou Avenue, because when we
Yeah.
did all the renovation,
I think we
we
just
discovered
covered
5,
Right.
so Quest and Comcast, but we actually put them in, so
Yeah.
maybe there's a negotiation.
I think that's been brought to our attention. Any other comments on, did that give you enough direction? Sounds like the municipal lighting, we're just gonna hold on for the moment. Sounds like the small G, we've got a process to move forward, and Kim, it sounds like we're gonna potentially get some direction from Mr. Parker next Tuesday in terms of what we can or cannot regulate. And on the co-location, that we're moving forward on trying to figure out a co-location.
And do you feel good about it based on that meeting? Do you
Yeah.
feel like if John can help with
Yes,
those
I do,
applications?
I do. And, well, the other thing we talked about is getting a summary of HR Green payments and what we got.
And getting the HR green
Right.
payments installed.
Ken, regarding municipal lighting, I believe it's something like 40% of the municipal electrical cost, and I really think evaluating it according to new cultural mores is a good way to go. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. We have streetlights that are really pretty close together. We don't need all that lighting. So, from a sustainability perspective and a cost effectiveness to the city with regard to our electric bill, which we could not put into the solar garden, by the way, street lighting was, you remember, we had a meeting with CSU, our rep, so I hope you would consider that still.
Okay.
And I think I may bring some of these ideas forward again at the end of the year when we do next year's budget. I'm just thinking.
Unfortunately, we got stuck on the lighting because of the cost to convert. They wanted $350,000 to convert that stuff, so we just got stuck there.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some other plan that we can look at.
Was that to convert it to LED?
Yes. Anybody else have a comment on this topic? All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay,
What's the next one?
item 5, discuss proposed resolution to commit to fully address climate change for Manitou Springs community. There are a number of folks, I think on this topic. Karina, do you wanna come on up? Karina?
Not here.
She's not here?
She's leaving tomorrow morning.
Okay.
There it goes.
There what goes?
Yeah, I know, I just talked to him. Now we heard it.
Okay, so, I don't know who's going to lead off this topic. We have in front of us, a proposed resolution, on climate change. And we also have in your packet, 12 steps to transition initiative, which was something that, Becky shared with us. And perhaps to focus the conversation, I prepared, let me hand out for you all, I prepared one of the engagement worksheets. And maybe I can go over that and then we can have some general discussion about what direction we want to take on this. And really what we're talking about is what process should we use at this point, which is why I created this worksheet. So let me just go over, you all have had the other information, let me just highlight pretty quickly what I put down here in terms of the questions, concerns, or opportunities. I don't know if I have enough for everybody in the audience, I apologize about that. But what are the city's priorities to create a sustainable environment and respond to climatic changes? Consideration of the resolution that we have to confirm those priorities and goals. How should this work be funded? Certainly is another topic. There may be other questions or opportunities that we need to consider. Who's interested and impacted? I would assume all citizens of Manitou Springs surrounding area, potential regional partners who are interested, particularly through the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, Obviously, Colorado Springs Utilities has an interest in our work. And presumably the desired outcome would be to raise awareness, explore ideas, contribute to decision-making, inspire, mobilize community action, and ensure that interested and impacted folks will live with and support the decision. And then in number 4, I spent some time looking for material that we have already done. We have created a lot. How many of you knew we passed a climate action plan in 2008? Somebody knew that. I thought you might know that. Long time ago. It's a good document. So we have some really good material. We have Plan Manitou. Not only do we have Plan Manitou, but we have some work that Karina did to summarize the elements of Plan Manitou concerning sustainability. Thank you, Karen and Karina, for providing that. Someone pointed out today that there's the Pikes Peak Regional Sustainability Plan that would provide some really good information. We met with the PPACG environmental planner today. She has offered some help, so there is some regional help we can bring. We have the draft resolution which you have in front of you. I just mentioned the climate action plan adopted in 2008. We have the 12-step transition initiative process that Becky had provided. We also have the 2008 Manitou Springs greenhouse gas inventory, emissions inventory.
And a 2017.
And a 2017 update with showing some comparison between the 2008 and the 2017. There's a spreadsheet that shows some of that data. We have the Compact of Colorado Communities, which Manitou Springs adopted in October of 2017. We have the Colorado Community Symposium Summary, Symposium for Advancing Clean Energy and Climate Protection. I found that material that kind of goes along with the compact. Online resources, there's dozens of them. Conrad from Green Cities pointed out to us today, starcommunities.org has a matrix of a whole variety of sustainability resilience issues that we should consider. And finally, the governor announced last week that DOLA will be providing clean energy challenge grants for $2 million for planning and $10 million for projects. That's for the whole state. I did put a call into DOLA today to find out what that was all about, but our regional representative was not available. So I just wanted to put down for you all here's some resources. Now the question is, what do we do with all this information? How do we put it together? How do we move forward with having a more robust conversation amongst the council and the community?
Well, I would like to start out with saying that this resolution covers these other options that you know are past work, and also includes work in here that is not, I don't think, fully expressed. And the push for this was the report from the scientists about we are running out of time to preserve what we have in terms of a livable climate on this planet. And so that was really what pushed us towards doing this. And so I think we could look at this resolution, either agree with it or not, make the changes, and then passing this resolution doesn't negatively impact any of these. In fact, it might bring them more into the public awareness. We have to put money towards this. This isn't just going to happen that we have a livable environment in 10 years. It's not going to happen unless we make it happen. So, you know, I like this addresses the creek, the air, the trees, the water, the waste, all these things that we talk about, but nothing seems to move along very quickly, or quickly enough, if at all. So I don't know if anybody in the audience has even seen it. You can get it in the packet, but I would like to at least maybe discuss these individually, and those of you who are in the know for all of these other ones, we can say a lot of this stuff is in Plan Manitou, but it's a difficult document to work with to try and gather up to make something happen. So perhaps this resolution, and if we fund getting this done, we can actually start moving forward.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I have some concerns about funding this. So I'll start by saying I was recycling my neighbor's cardboard this morning, so I'm totally for that. I think this whereas in the next 11 years should be not 11 years, it should say immediately and forevermore. This 11-year thing really bugs me. I don't know why it does. But I don't see how we really move forward. Resolutions are great. their words, they don't have a lot of teeth. That's one thing I've learned on council. So I think we really need to hear, so much of this has so much to do with planning. I would like to hear from Kim and her group, how much would this take? How much budget would this take? How many staff people would it take? Because unless we actually do that piece of it and start applying how it's gonna happen through our staff, and because volunteers are great, but they need staff to really get it right and nail it and make it happen. That to me would be where I would want the next phase of this to be, so that long after we're gone from council, every council that comes forward will be able to see this is what they wanted and this is how they propose to do it, and this is how much staff it takes, and this is how much budget it takes, and this is how much time it takes. So it's like a project plan to do this. Because it's wonderful words, but I feel like passing a resolution like this is like passing the buck. It's like, I feel great, I passed this resolution, but nothing happens, and that would really break my heart, so.
It's a resolution, cause that's what I was asked to do.
Okay.
Put a resolution
And I'm
together.
not complaining about it,
No.
I just,
I'm just
So how would
saying,
you, how would
you
you
know,
keep
this-
going with that conversation? How would you carry that forward then?
well, I think you would have to have some, I really don't know, honestly, but I mean, there has to be engagement of some kind. And I don't know if Kim and her planning and whatever other departments would be involved in this, even have the time in their budget, the time in their workday right now, and the budget to expend to do what I just said needs to be done for us to truly move on this. So it's almost like a budget thing, it's a council decision deciding, is this what we want all of these, our staffs to do this year, next year? Do we wanna set a date in the future? That's the first thing. Do we, and we could have community engagement from citizens who say, I want you to do it now, council. I'm coming to you and I'm telling you it needs to start with your next budget cycle. You need to fix it. That's what I'd like to hear. If that's the case, then I think that as a council, when we go through our budget season, we ask these departments to look at whatever this final version of this resolution is and tell us what they need in the budget to start making these things happen. And that is also, budget is open to the public and community engagement, so we, you guys will all get to come to that, or an all 8-hour day or more, so that you can help us figure out what you wanna do. But to me, I don't know, Becky, does that sound reasonable?
Well, sure, and all of this stuff is in Plan Manatee, and we've had that for how many years? So it's time that we actually get busy on getting some of this done. I think initially, we need someone who can guide all this, a sustainability director, part-time sustainability director, someone who actually knows what it's all about, and then each department, I mean, this is like the Holiday Inn without an environmental impact statement. That stuff shouldn't happen. And so, hold every department to, what are your sustainability goals, where are you failing, and where are you excelling, and let's get on the program for this. And maybe even tie it into the employee merit pay, like, hey, I did this, my department did this, and it's like, cool, extra stars for you. I don't know what it looks like, I just know that we need to move forward on it. We've had all these other things, we do have the greenhouse gas report, which is great. And we have, things coming along, but it's not fast enough, and a lot of things are being overlooked.
Other thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, I think Susan is spot on. If it's not in the budget, nothing's gonna happen. So I kind of put together functions, just off the top of my head, some functions that we've been talking about over the past year or so. Public information officer, volunteer coordinator, sustainability coordinator, additional people in water and sewer, we talked about just last week, parks, rec, open space and trails director, staff engineer, full-time arborist, additional capability in finance, a parking, and transportation person on staff, a community engagement person on staff. So I just wanna kind of put it in context of some other things that we've talked very seriously about. And I think we just need to do the hard work and decide what our priorities are and, resource them appropriately. Cause I don't think, I love the resolution, love to do all that stuff. We do not even begin to have the bandwidth to do what's in this resolution at this point, and I do think it's a waste of time to do a resolution that we just know we're not gonna be able to accomplish. And volunteers are great, but there's just so much that they're able, to do. So, that's where I'm coming from.
Other thoughts?
Well, I agree with both Susan and Becky, actually, that, a resolution has no teeth. And, one idea would be for council to look at one item from the resolution and actually choose one that could be actualized within the next 6 months. You know, and if each year council chose one, I mean, that would be better than nothing. And then, of course, the good news about DOLA having money for environmental campaigns, if you can find out if that can go towards somebody who can operate a program. We have all these things that you've listed in terms of studies and ideas of what Manatee can do, so I don't think it would take very long to get, a qualified person to actually be able to make some progress with some of these.
Right, so somebody might be able to come in and say, okay, here's the resolution we want to adopt. Put some cost to it, help us put some funding options to it, a time frame of how we would roll it out, somebody could do that potentially.
I
don't
hope
know
so,
whether DOLA would
yeah,
help
plus
them,
other
but
ideas
they could do that.
in these studies, yeah.
Hold on, Becky, before, let's just hear around, anybody else care?
I have to agree with the resolution that, you know, we adopted, but if we can't follow through with what's in here, then it's kind of a waste of our time. I appreciate everybody putting the time into this, but, and I would be more, you know, voting for this, but if we're not gonna be able to do some of this, I would like to see maybe the other come, like you just said, get somebody in here, look at this, what is it gonna cost us, where can we go, and, you know, we're rolling in the budget time anyway, maybe we can fund one, or we could approve it and then do one thing this year.
What do you all think about doing one thing? One thing that jumped out at me, for instance, was item number 5, reduce waste through eliminating single-use plastic and styrofoam. That's
The high school was working on that too,
that's something that we could
wasn't
probably
it?
do
Karen?
I
sooner than
considered
later.
it as a project.
Oh, they didn't do it?
No.
Oh, sorry.
A couple questions. One is, what's the status of the sustainability work group?
It's pretty loose. We meet on an as-needed basis. We have about, you know, we started with about 15, 16 people, and it's, weighing down to about 5 or 6 that show up with regularity.
Cause just like, I would love to hear a report from what you guys are doing and what you would like to do, cause I would see this as something that you guys could sink your teeth into. I think the plastics would be a great 6-month initiative, and the DOLA grant would be a great initiative. But I'm just loath to put any other requirements on staff at this point in time, particularly when we don't have the city administrator after Thursday. So, I would just love to.
Well, what gets done is what I do.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, so, and I'm not gonna put in a lot more energy on this. I would like to let you know though that I have talked with Best Way Disposal ever since we did our recycle program. I've been trying to get them to also provide a bin for composting, which they, year after year, they say, no, thank you. However, this year, you know, they've sold to a different company that purports to have, you know, very, green, visions. And, I got a call from the general manager, Judd Staten, offering a proposal for Manitou to, they would provide to us a 3-yard bin where citizens could bring their compost. And, you know, it would be at a city site. They would come and dump it and remove it on a regular basis, and probably as an as-needed basis. And I talked to Ken about it and said, you know, is this something you wanna pursue? And he said, we'll get some costing. And so I've got another call in on that and costing. And I was thinking that maybe a location could be Hiawatha Gardens for a bin, you know, because I know that a lot of the neighborhoods won't want something like that near them. So that's in the works, and that would be something, you know, to actually have some composting for our community, and it would be a city expense. That's one of the things I'm trying to find out on a weekly or monthly basis what the expense would be, but I doubt it would be a lot, I think we could afford it, so I'm working on that.
Okay, hold on, Becky, before, Jay, did you want to weigh in on the topic?
Sure. Clay Brown says that your priorities are your budget. And so we can pass a resolution, be much better to come up with 5 things to fund next year. I see 5 things that could probably get done next year for you.
Okay.
But it's a matter of writing them down and just funding it. Even at some cost that might seem crazy, just do it. Most of these are ordinances or easy policies to come up with. I think that'd be a smarter way of going, because if we don't pass anything in the budget, then this resolution essentially meant nothing to us whatsoever, whether we pass it or not. Unfortunately, it's true.
And doesn't PPACG, do water monitoring, water quality monitoring for the creeks?
They don't directly do water quality monitoring.
I thought they did.
PPACG?
Didn't they just hire an environmental person?
They were missing one for a couple of years.
They just hired.
Ah,
But I
so,
don't think they do the actual testing themselves. They're just a regional planning organization, I think. But we can check that.
monitoring, yeah.
I think it's gonna be a hybrid of policy or, enacting some code. And I really appreciated Nancy's analysis of, here's all the pending resources. At the end of the day, these are all human capital intensive efforts. And we do need to be very mindful of that, extremely.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, ComEd is more than Green Cities. ComEd is the sustainability director at Pikes Peak Community College. He has students that could come help planning, and so does UCCS, students who it's part of their college to come help, and so does CC. I mean, we had that conversation of getting some help. I mean, we should mine all of these programs and maybe eliminate some of these. There's more than 5, there's 11.
I'm just saying, easily do 5 next year.
I would say
if we
any of
budget.
these, none of these would be something I say, oh, well, we don't need that, because I think we need all of these. And I did not write this, Corina wrote this. It came right out of the Sustainable Environment Working Group. So it is, to me, it's their work, it's the work of that committee. So, we did talk about at the meeting this afternoon of maybe passing this on first reading and not necessarily have a second reading quite so fast. Have a couple of months to engage people. What do they really want? I mean, the pollinator people are all about protecting our pollinators. On the composting, I would wanna know where that compost goes, and do we have to pay to get compost back? Our land works really hard to grow biomass, and if we give it away, what do we have? If we have to pay it to get it back, that kind of defeats the purpose, in my opinion. So I think there's a lot of conversations that this brings up. So Corina was apologizing, she said, I hope it's not too radical. She is, we've got the dates of 2020 on here, 2021 on here. I mean, that's like less than 2 years away of getting some of this done. She went to Poland, she went to the global conference on climate change, and this is what she's producing. Christmas lighting.
Wait, hold on. Stay on task. We're trying to decide the process moving forward.
I'm talking about
Just
the budget.
I know.
So we could put this into the budget, and we could reduce, to me, the future is what's important. It's not, and sustainability is important.
So let's figure out a path forward,
We
because
could
we're
find
not.
the money for this if we wanted to. We could get a sustainability coordinator for $50,000 and have someone who works with does your job, but works side by side. Here's what public works, you can do this, and how are you doing on that, let me help you on that. Side by side with them to pull some of this into reality, rather than just throwing darts like, oh, let's do this, and we've got all these
Okay.
disconnected. So I say,
What's your plan forward?
let's talk to the local colleges and universities,
Who's
see
let's?
if we can get some.
Who's the let's? Who's gonna do that?
And who's
I think
supervising them?
Pardon?
Who's supervising them? That's a lot of work.
Yeah, so the question is whether it is the sustainability work group willing to take on the project to figure out how we move forward?
No.
If not, then
I
how
don't
do we
think
get
so.
some capacity So we could certainly talk with DOLA and see, can they help us find some capacity to do the work? It's what I really am uncomfortable with is, let's talk to somebody, it's the, who's gonna do that?
Well, I can talk to Conrad, I can talk to Ian Johnson, I can talk to.
Are you gonna spearhead and then bring forth a proposal back to us in some number of days, weeks, whatever, about here's how
Yeah,
we're
it's
gonna
gonna be
fund?
more like weeks, not gonna be days
Yeah,
or
I don't
something
need
like
dates,
this.
I mean literally, but, so you would spearhead a proposal of how we would move forward?
If you would like me to, I could do that.
What's your budget?
I have a comment that relates to this overall discussion that we have every week. And I think, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but we've talked about, a lot about what are our priorities. I mean, one week it's pipes, this week it's this, next week it'll be something else. And, you know, this whole conversation about the library and community centers and all of this, I think we need to have a major outreach, community effort, and we need everybody to come to the table and say this is priority and this is why. And then we need to talk about funding it, because I can already tell you that everything I've talked about this year isn't gonna make it in this budget. I think we all know that. I mean, every week we go, yeah, we'll add that to the budget retreat. But that's like passing a resolution. I'm sorry, but I think we have got, I mean, asking Becky to do this one step, or whoever is, it's just not enough. I mean, every week we're talking about things that need to happen. I don't think we have enough money to do them all. So as a community, we're going to have to figure out what we're willing to pay, and how we're willing to pay it, and what our priorities are. And so I don't know where we are with that, which is where I think we really, that's the grand answer to this and every other thing we've talked about since last budget season.
So the community engagement work group, I think, is interested and willing to help promote a community conversation. We need to set the questions.
Okay.
So one of the purposes of this worksheet is for us to help identify the questions, and then that group is willing to bring the community together to address those questions. So is the question, which of these 12 items we should tackle and in what order? Is the question, are there other things we should tackle? So I think that's really the issue is, one, do we want a community engagement process? Two, what are the questions we want to address? Hold on a second.
I have two, if I could, two things. One is that for the most part, I think that the community, elects us to set those large priorities. I'd love to send everything back out to the community to say, tell us what you think, but at some point, we've gotta, you know, roll up our sleeves and set priorities, and we've never done a good, and one whole time it sounds like we've never done a good job with that. But I'm perfectly willing to, well, if Becky would be willing to go out and talk to Adola and find out how to get that grant, to me, that's a good.
Well, I haven't called into DOLA.
Okay, and start working on that, that would be great, and doing, if the community wants to have an engagement process on this, that would be great. I don't know why we have a sustainability work group if you're the only one on it, that seems kinda goofy that we set that up.
It wasn't that, always that way.
Yeah, it wasn't always that way.
She's not
It's
the
just
only
faded
one.
away.
So that's another issue,
She's
another
not
topic.
the only one on it, Francois Rod and Karina McHenry, and
Okay,
there's some really high-powered people on that board, on
Jerry?
that working group.
we just need their recommendations and then they need our direction, and that's, I haven't seen that, so for the most part, so I'm just looking for some
Yeah, we haven't seen
return
it.
on not that we've invested anything in you guys, but there were some expectations when you guys, when
Yes.
we set you up.
Yes.
So, I'm supportive of a community engagement process. If the community engagement and governance group wants to take this as one on, that's fine. But ultimately, it comes down to priorities and budget.
And budget. Okay. Anybody else from the council want to weigh in, Bob? So, I'm not sure I heard a clear direction. I heard a variety of pieces. One is to perhaps have the community engagement work group work on this, but I'm not sure I understand what they're working on, because I'm not sure we have given them a question per se to work on. So until we do that, it doesn't make any sense to send this off to them without what is the question that we want to address? What is the opportunity or issue that we want to address? We could look at this and say, okay, is the issue, what are the city's priorities? That could be, how should we prioritize this? We could ask them to weigh in on the specifics of these 12 recommendations, so those are 2. I'm not sure about funding, potentially they could, but, I see you, Mr. Lyden, and we need to get some additional feedback here.
I intend to talk to Conrad and Ian and Linda about getting some volunteers to come in and help. Maybe perhaps the thing to do is to go through all these, well, plan narrative, cause Kermit already did that. And look at some of these others that have already been passed and that we're either are or not carrying forward. And to me, the question is, what are we doing about climate change? What are we doing? We either believe it's happening or we don't. What does our community believe? And the people I talk to, they believe that nothing is being done, and I tend to agree with that. So that's the question, if you ask me.
Yeah, I want a little bit more specific in terms of what direction council is giving to either the work group, if this group is gonna be part of that, if not, what other group. I hear there's some volunteers, but somebody needs to supervise them, give them direction, ask them something to do. And so that's what I'm struggling with.
Well, I've been involved in a lot of these initiatives that you've listed here, and if you do get someone through DOLA, I'd be happy to meet with them and work with them and kind of get them off the ground in terms of all the resources that we have at our disposal, so I'll definitely offer that.
I would just want to say that I have to agree with Jay earlier in his comment when he said maybe there's 5 things on here we could do. I mean, we're looking at, is there something on here that we can say, okay, we commit to as a council and say they're not gonna cost us a lot of money, it's an education process or whatever, have this group bring it back to us and go that way. But I also have to agree with Susan that, every week, whoever comes in, we've got a new agenda, a new issue, and we need to settle on what our priorities are as a council and say, okay, this is the direction we're going. We wanna get to this, but this may be 12 months, 18 months down the road, but we're serious about it, or we can do 2 or 3 things on this year, or next year, but we're heading in this direction of, here we go, cause we keep saying we need a capital improvements program, we need this, but we've gotta stick by something, and I think that's an education we have to give to the community. This is where we're going. So, yeah, you've got a great idea, but we're probably not gonna listen to you this year about it, we can't. We just can't financially do that, and make that, kind of understood instead of, and I appreciate all the groups, but we just can't continue bringing in a new item every week.
So what do you all think about finding one of these things I threw out, number 5, the plastic, and working on that this year?
I got 5 written down in an email and what it would probably take to do it, and you guys have it, and see what you think of it.
Okay.
They're all ordinances followed up with policies. It's all staff time, it's attorney fees, it's time that we don't have, but if we had money to put toward people to create these things for us, and staff wouldn't have to do it. That's where the cost comes in. It's either cost because staff is working on it and they're not working on something else, or whatever it might be. But if it's the most important thing, put money in the budget to do these 5 things and be done.
So how about this?
It's not done with the whole list, but done with these 5 for that budget cycle.
Right, how about we do this? How about we put this back on the work session? We gather the information of what resources DOLA might provide to us in the short term. Look at Jay's list, and maybe I could go over that list with DOLA and say, hey, could you help us with these things? If so, how? And bring that information back to the council in a couple weeks or 30 days. And then we would have a little bit more information to work on.
That sounds good to me. There is someone already working on the plastic and styrofoam in town, so I don't think, if you really wanted the low-hanging fruit, that's trees. Planting trees has so many benefits to it, and it doesn't have to be expensive.
Okay. Alright,
So if we pick one, let's pick the trees and rebuild the urban forest, close the canopy, so we don't barbecue.
Okay. Anybody else?
So I'm not opposed to going forward with some easy low-hanging fruit. What I would like to see is I think what Nancy said is true, we're elected to make these decisions about what to move forward. I don't think we need community engagement necessarily on this resolution, but we need to have that overall discussion with what our priorities are, from soup to nuts, and then take this piece that people have already worked on and put it out there and see where it ranks, and how we wanna solve the problem, like long-term solutions, like an environmental, like a sustainability coordinator, all these different things. Nancy made a great list of potential things. So that would be where I would say the community engagement piece falls in, is we do what we can right away with DOLA and budget, and then, but we won't do it all, and we won't solve who does it forever, and it needs to be a forever thing. And that's where it goes into this bigger pile of priorities that we have a big community engagement on, because that's everything in town.
So let me see if I can capture it. Let me see if I can capture it in. So review the list of potential implementable options from Jay. 2, review some resource availability from DOLA. 3, find out what resources are available from the university. What else? Did that capture what we got? And we will continue this discussion in 2 weeks, or probably more likely 30 days. Mr. Liner, real quickly.
Yeah, maybe you could include the Fountain Creek Watershed Protection District on the water side. I've noticed that our water, just in the last 6 months, is coming out of the past pals. It's never been that way before. I would wholeheartedly encourage 5G to be a part of this environmental. It's not the big picture climate change, but it is more localized to us. 5G, very important. There was one other thing, on the resolve conflicts here in your worksheet. I don't know why that would be omitted. If we were to be addressing some of these issues and there were conflicts, that would seem to be the community engagement and governance work group duty to follow through on, and I think we're gonna have some conflicts. I would not like to see this thing just brushed through DOLA or anyone else.
Okay, so we're gonna review this again after we've gotten some additional information and hopefully have either some agreement that here are the items we wanna work towards and allocate some funds to do. I think we will have that conversation in somewhat 30 days. Is that about right? Yes? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, item number 6. Let's see. Yeah, let's take, oh, we're gonna do that now? Before the break? Okay, so we have something to do before the break.
Oh,
We do? Okay,
why are you looking at me?
I'm just looking at you. Yes,
It's my last-
Nancy's
it's my
gonna
last
lead us
meeting.
off before we take a break, and then we can take a break and celebrate.
So for those of you who may not know, I think everybody does know, tonight is Leah's last council meeting. So we wanted to, recognize all the wonderful work she has done for us, appropriately. So, couple things. First, here, Jay,
Put the card in the envelope.
but there's a couple other little things.
Which way should we go?
We can do this, and you would open this. This is from all of council.
Thank you. Let me read my card first. I'll pass it around so y'all can read it too. That's for sure. Since people like you don't really retire. They just go on to new and better things. Oh, thank you so much, you all. This is very nice. Okay. All these are papers, so I'm just gonna do it. Thank you. So I go back to them.
We know that Leah has some hobbies, one in particular.
I do.
So, in talking with people who sew a lot.
Yes,
They
a
said
gift card to Joann's.
Yeah, that would be a great gift card, and also is a packet of cards with artwork by
Oh,
Rocky.
yes.
By Mr.
Oh,
Rocky.
these are.
And because we all like to eat, as evidenced by, we can share cake. Some cake.
Do we have plates?
We have cake.
Oh, look at that.
Plates and,
All right, well,
These are beautiful.
so,
I won't let you use them.
So Leah, if you would like to cut in very
I'd
small
love to,
pieces,
I'd love
there are
to
more
cut.
people here tonight than I was expecting, so. We don't
I
need
know,
this
I
many.
know, I just looked through all of them.
Very nice job.
Gorgeous, I mean, there's like, I spent, you know, all day just decorating it, Gary.
so we have, I just wanna thank you for everything that you've done. We'll get some cake, cut, join us for some cake, we'll take a
Thank you, Gary.
5 or 10 minute recess.
Thank you.
Come on back with the last couple of.
I'm shaking hands. Welcome. Here, I'll shake Leah's hand and then I'll cut the cake. Thank you. Oh, wait, hand me my phone, I gotta take a picture. Shall we get you over there somewhere? You want us to take it, Leah?
Is it on the floor?
Orange?
Yes. I'm gonna take a picture of it before I cut it.
Here's the whole stuff, we need to take a picture of you with it.
Okay. Okay, you're gonna hold it up?
You hold it up and I'll take a picture. Here you go.
Oh, you know what, I have this vision of it sliding off on the floor. How about this? Okay, thank you. I'll serve I know, that's what I'm, actually, that's what I was thinking, and I saw this really great frame, I was at Hobby Lobby today, because I had to get, my daughter wants to learn how to cross stitch, so I'm giving her all the stuff to teach her. Well, I like the ones like that look like windows, you know, and you can have multiple, you can make something that actually, a lot of them in one brand. I have a plan that if we can move forward, you want to be here all that cheaper.
Yeah, I've got this.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It's all down here.
South Carolina? Isn't it gorgeous? I love it. Oh, thank you, Marcy. I did, I very much, and I.
Because they got their Charleston. Because the taxes.
And you know that. Here's that one in July. Oh, are you? Rebuilt. Oh, I love it. Oh, okay. No, I believe it. I mean, that's not like married to, you know what I mean? In other words, I love it, but I can stand to do every. I agree with you, because if it's spread out. No, it's good. Okay, have a good day. Because my own reaction to it was I love it. I mean, they're all like, you know, I mean, when we lived in downtown, I was on the board and the board, and after every Christmas we bought the LED lights for 50, 75, or 90% off. And that's how we decorate. Oh, really? Because we don't do that because it takes too much for staff to put them on. But I kind of liked Here's the sales. Go to Walgreens. You know, they're 90% off. because it belongs to something extreme.
So, how the things start by the way, who's on that? Figure something.
But there was a moment in my email where we were talking more about I didn't see anything, you know, I wouldn't recognize that box. Okay. You're welcome. There have been a lot of discussions about you all can only park and get a wristband and like to minimize the. I mean, there's been so many conversations about it. It's not up to us. We can provide 10 ideas every week. Definitely call it a spring spring. At the very top, we'll see.
Could you imagine that with a concert?
And what we told them that we think it's overused and they just kind of send the meeting around. We don't think so. It would be like, you know, if you told me something was and I was like, I don't think you're right. You know, that's kind of what the conversation is. But it's more, for them, it's more like, we just don't think you're right. So that's harder. It's harder. They're putting new trails. You know how now you can only bail out at the bailout? They're gonna put in lower bailouts. And when we said that's gonna bring more people, they went, we don't think so. Oh yeah, I was trying to get all the shit. You got one of because I mean, you were even a coach. The place I know is cheap and it's and have good breakfast for like young children. I don't like lunch. Replace all the $10. And a Coke is $3 or $4. Yeah, but yeah. Because with the increase in minimum wage, they just passed that right over and increasing passed it on. So I think that might be it. And I think it could be the thought diversity. A little bit. And so I'm trying to so maybe look at that. I just went through. They weren't. Yeah, so I like that music too. Again, I go back to oh, you're welcome. More than one. Hey, Jeff. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be here on Thursday. And then I'm coming back to take it out. Oh, I was going to tell you that I apologize.
None of these are a lot of
My manager is You know, I don't know. We had our first board meeting, which was fine, but I'm meeting her for coffee on Thursday. So I haven't really sat down with her yet. She wants to come and meet all of you. That's on the list. And we've got the I should have probably turned it off for my sister's training. She was working like up north, and she was working for Station for university. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of
Susan, I think that's right in front of you actually belongs to Bob because I thought you were sitting up there.
We didn't even.
I don't think he counts it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. I heard he looked pretty relaxed. Almost like a different guy. Yeah, that's good. And then his wife, like, figure out where they want to be. I know. It was just that like perfect storm. I know. I'm certainly glad for
Okay.
Who wants
Everybody back? You ready?
I'm ready, sort of.
Almost? Sort of.
I'm sort of almost ready, yes. So, we're gonna talk about city administrator position
We are.
process?
We're gonna call item 6.
Okay.
Discussion regarding the city administrator position. Ms. Ash, you're gonna help us out here.
I am. I'm gonna start with a couple things. First of all, you all have, I know I sent you all the resumes, there's 16. I did send out,
Everybody get one?
yeah, everybody should have a notebook. In your notebook, it's the 16 and they're in alphabetical order. And then, you also had a sample evaluation form that you could have used if you wanted to go through that process individually. But one of the things I sent out to you late this afternoon or mid-afternoon was an idea around how we might go through an initial interim selection process, or at least to decide who we were going to interview. Turn that on.
And let me just, for the public's knowledge, we have 2 items on our agenda. One is this item on this agenda, and then we will be going into executive session to actually go through the names of the folks that we wish to consider to identify the finalists. So we're going to do that in private, just for the protection of those that haven't wanted this information public. We will publish the names of the finalists once we get there, so everybody will know that, and set up a schedule and so forth. But that's why we're breaking this up into 2 parts tonight.
Right. And so there's actually even a couple of parts to this process for this item. One is talking about how we move forward with the interim, and the other is to make a decision with regard to our selection of an acting city administrator, since we will not have an interim city administrator before my departure on Thursday. So that will also be part of this discussion. But I'm just gonna share with you what I used to do when I had a lot more than 16 resumes. Is that I would read the job description, I would go through and look at the things that I've identified on this evaluation sheet, like education requirements, their experience, which would include, in this case, government. I know one of the things that I've heard very loudly from this group as we've gone through several processes is knowledge of Colorado. So that might be somebody that has previously maybe been a city administrator or worked in Colorado, might not now. Then I also looked at lives in Colorado. So again, we're looking at an interim position, having somebody from Colorado, lives in Colorado and or Manitou Springs as part of that, would reduce our costs and also address some of the issues we have about understanding what they're coming into and how quickly they could move forward. Familiar with Manitou Springs. Leadership strong. You know, I was looking for somebody that had shown at some point in their history, either through their accomplishments or their responsibilities, had shown an ability to be a strong leader. They might tell stories about particular accomplishments or challenges that they had.
Examples of innovation, that seems to be a pretty strong, a pretty strong attribute that we want in this person. So not necessarily that they're the ones that had all the innovative ideas, but do they know how to encourage it? Do they know how to embrace it and make it happen? Then community outreach and or engagement, that seems to be also. That would go back to the experience piece. And then I have a couple of random, what I call bonus ones. So one of them might be significant accomplishment that caught my attention. And the other one worth 10 points would be, can't put my finger on it, bonus points. And that's the things that aren't necessarily there, but you read them and you go, wow, that person sounds really neat. And I never would have thought of putting that in as an item that I would, you know, give them points for. So that would be a more detailed evaluation sheet. However, in the spirit of moving more quickly, having 16, I made the suggestion this afternoon, and I don't know if people had a chance to do it, but my process, and again, we won't do it now because we're not going to be talking names at the moment, but would be to develop 3 piles. I call them an A, B, and C pile. There's an A pile that says, yes, this person seems qualified, yes, I think I'd be really interested in learning more and having an interview. The B pile is, these people would probably be okay, but only if I can't get any of my A people. And my C people are the ones that, no, I'm really not interested in talking to these people. And so I looked at a 6, a 5, and a 5 to get us to the 16, in the hopes that we can get an overlap among the 7 of at least 3 to 5 candidates that all were A's. That was the goal. So that's the process that I have to start with that I would like to engage in executive session.
Okay.
However, in this discussion, so that's part of it, is to be able to talk about that process. I gotta have to put glasses on. So in the spirit of having ground rules, and in the importance of trying to get to the right place, I did go ahead and write some up. I had some help. So in order to make this really work, we need everybody to participate fully, which means you don't necessarily have to talk the exact same amount, but we have to make sure that everybody's heard through this process. Be candid and open. That means if there's something that isn't going the right way, you know, don't look at your feet, look up and say, I don't like the way this is going, and maybe even better, offer an alternative. If you disagree, speak up respectfully, and then look for and support common threads. So we may not always want to go in the right direction, but rather than looking for the pieces that don't, that don't come together, look for the ones that do, and let's try to focus on the things that really, we say, yes, all these characteristics, whether it's education, experience, living in Colorado, whatever. And in some cases, for some of you, it's going to be, yes, this is really important. For others of you, it'll be, that wouldn't be high on my list, but I think I can live with that. So that we can get to whatever some of those common areas are. So that's my proposal about how we would want to move forward in the executive session. So, I'm already with my hot little pen to come up with ideas about whether you like that idea, whether you have some amendments to that idea, whether you want to throw that baby out with the bathwater and start over. I mean,
Well, let's just make sure everybody's okay with these ground rules, or are there others we should get out there?
Sure.
Will that serve us well to follow the standard direction that we laid out? Think so? Yep.
You good? It's not rocket science if you have.
One is not happening right now.
I know, Becky. One is not happening. Are you happy with this?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's even better if you go, yes, good.
Maybe they have to turn on their mic.
Okay,
Their mic is
that's
on.
okay.
Alright, sounds like everybody has weighed in.
Okay.
These are good. Anything to add to this? You know, if we did this in this process, that would really help. Anything that's not up there?
I have something that has been bugging me, but it's not necessarily a ground rule. It's that
we have a job description that's for a permanent CA, and we don't have a job description for an acting or an interim. And I feel like they're different, unless I missed it, and so this has been something that is just not.
Well, okay, then let me ask this, I
feeling
mean,
good with me.
I don't know, this may be more than we can accomplish in 60 minutes. Do you all have the job descriptions? Here?
There's one job description, correct?
There's only one. It's the one dated May 15th. So what I would suggest is, if you wanna get to that is, are there things that we wanna highlight for sure that needs to be in an interim, or are there things that we would say, we don't care about whether or not this is in an interim and a acting? I mean, I just think we would wanna go through and maybe purge it in some way.
I think that one of the reasons we've had trouble finding a permanent is because we're looking for somebody who doesn't exist. Or smile. Therefore, this job description is very broad, and that, I think it's fine for a permanent, I mean, it's good enough for a permanent position who would come on long-term, and this is the whole view of what you do, right? But I think for an interim or acting, if we don't, I would suggest that we have the more specific job description have specific tasks that really have to be done.
Okay.
Okay?
Do you wanna talk about those?
Well, I wanna talk about it just a little bit more in terms of, I mean, neither you nor Malcolm could do everything we threw at you. I think it's fair to say.
No, but I did more than I thought.
I know.
I mean, seriously, I'm gonna send it out to you and show you, I was surprised.
And I'm really pleased with that, and really pleased with the efforts of both of you. But I feel like we're in this cycle where we haven't learned from those two things, because we're just gonna give this new person that same list. And I'm not sure that where we are as a council is totally thrilled with the outcome of that. And that's not to say that those people, that Malcolm and Leah failed us, I'm saying we failed them, because we didn't narrow it down and say, as acting or interim, these things out of the broad description.
We did that.
With them?
We had.
So do we have this for this person?
No.
Because I think we need to look at this type of list when evaluating an acting or an interim. If we're looking at overall broad criteria for a permanent position that we hope is going to last, you know, the average life of a city administrator is something like 3 years. It's a whole different story. And if you guys disagree with me, I'm one of 7. So you can all speak up and fully participate as part of the ground rules right now and say respectfully disagree with me. And there's a few other things I just can't see them because you're standing.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay. So I'm throwing it out to you. These are things that I am very uncomfortable with. I feel like we have some things we need to tighten up if we want the success we keep saying we want and keep saying is eluding us. Okay.
Nancy.
I respectfully disagree. And that is because I anticipate that this person will be on board or I'm not talking about the acting now, because I'm talking about an interim that hopefully we'll have on relatively soon, but not immediately. So I think that the interim, to be the longer term person, will have to have, in all likelihood, will have to be on board for at least a year, with the anticipation of potentially being longer than that, because that person will also be able to apply for the, when the new council comes on board. But when the new council comes on board, it's, you know, we can expect at least 3 to 4 months, at least 3 to 4 months. So we're looking at close to a year before we have, a full-time person. So I'm looking at this person like they are a full-time person.
So maybe one of the things I'm hearing is the acting we're looking at separately from the interim is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
If I understand correctly, the acting is just until we get an interim.
Okay, so if I do this, then I think, are there certain characteristics in the acting that we wanna talk about, or do we wanna just go to the interim? Of course, you're saying there's no difference.
No, she's saying there's no difference necessarily.
No, between the interim and a regular.
Yes.
I got that. No, I'm sorry, I didn't finish that last part. I figured that. Right.
At this point, my sense is that we just need to discuss the act in executive session.
Okay.
Cause I think we're, I don't know how much we can talk about that in this session.
Okay.
Because we'd be talking about specific people.
Okay. Okay.
So let's continue the conversation, the difference between what I'm hearing Susan say, which is, you know, is there a separate job description for the interim? And I'm hearing perhaps should be. What I'm hearing Nancy say is, if this person's gonna be around for perhaps a year, would we not expect them to fulfill everything that needs to get done from the more full job description that we've laid out? I think that's really that's the issue that I'm hearing.
It's always at the direction of council that this guides the type of person that we would want, that I would want to hire. You know, rights and more specific stuff, but I think that is the, I don't think we need another job description for them. When we do the contract with them, we can do scope of work at that point. We can, more, you know, specifics, but at this point I would just rather hire for.
I think that's what we did before, so we had the general job description, and then we came up with kind of the scope of work, if you will, for Malcolm and
Which one is that one?
this says Manitou Springs interim city administrator job duties and responsibilities. This was Leah's, I think this was in her contract.
But it was based off of Malcolm.
It was, yes, it was
Yeah.
continuation,
Yeah.
and Malcolm actually prepared most of this.
So it's not, was it in a packet?
This is not
Oh, here, I'll give it to you.
in the packet.
Because here's what I did.
Was it in the packet?
Yeah, are you asking?
It wasn't one thing, but it's been a while.
Okay, right this minute.
No.
I think there's enough from everybody. And
Did council approve this? Is that what
Yes.
you're asking?
you did.
Well, we did. My question is, what packet was it in so I can go look at it?
Would have been with Leah's
January 8th.
contract.
January 8th, 2019. So those were the specific things I was asked to do. 1 through 19, I think.
And those were built on a list that Malcolm originally created,
Yes,
and Malcolm created that list how?
from the list we created for him.
Okay.
And I think the things that didn't get done were put on this list, and maybe some other things he added.
And some of them are accomplishment things. And some of them are just like attend weekly city council and staff meetings. I mean, that's not a pass fail, that's just to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them are more project related.
Okay, well, I'm pleased that we've had this conversation to at least talk about the different types and the different responsibilities and the different tasks. I think if we're going to talk about acting, there would be specific traits about candidates that would be important, because you have to be able to delegate, you have to be able to recognize what priorities are. I mean, you have to do that in a permanent job too, but it's even more critical that it be higher up in your core competencies if you're coming in for a shorter amount of time. You cannot get bogged down, because there's no time to recover.
So what additional things do
That
you
has
wanna
to do with more.
put up on this board and or,
So I'm getting rid of the acting for now, I'm talking about the interim.
Just to continue with Susan's theme, something struck me similar to what you said, Susan, and that was this. As I went through the candidates and looked at what they've done, I thought about what do we need to do in the next 6 months particularly. And in the next 6 months, it's my opinion that we have more in process, maybe 9 months worth of work. We wanna get done in 6 months.
why 6 months? What is that time period?
Well, to finish this year, this council, this budget, and have that in the wood, so we don't have carryovers, so we don't have, so real accomplishments. So what's an example? An example would be the fire training center. It's low-hanging fruit, it's manageable financially, it's something we can commit to. Another example would be, are we gonna do seed funding or not for the library, which gets into whether or not that ballot issue will pass, and what's contingency plan on that. So there's a number of things like that.
Short-term objectives.
Short-term objectives that I think are very important, that the, and that for influences, when you look at the candidate, you say, this is what we need to accomplish. That gets very local, almost micro-local to our community. There are things that we all want to be conversant about, we want to see executed and prioritized. And I think we also want to move into more of a council as policy role, and the staff role is more on execution and on recommendations. We've kind of blended it, and I think we all recognize that. We need to start that differentiation a little more clearly. So, as I think about it, I was looking at those kinds of qualities. An individual who can come in, quickly understand what the projects are, what the workload is, what the importance is of the community, deliver on those, be very mindful of having staff building an institutional memory. That's what we're doing, and important to that. And then council would be left with actually really honing our description of how, consistent with the charter, we want the city administrator to work long-term wise, and start putting in place those things that we've talked about. You know, the buffer that sits in the personnel manual that describes the relationship between the city administrator and each department head, because each one is unique. You know, who's responsible for what? These are policy things that we don't really, at this juncture, we've talked about it enough, we don't need much staff input on that. And we can be spending our time on policy, because we basically have a budget to complete. So to me, that becomes important. And so if Leah were to update her focus items, I think they would become like that. They would go in that direction, and then we'd be looking at the candidates through those requirements.
There's two
So
other,
I see a very big difference.
there's two other pieces to this, that I'm not finished with, but I'll send them to you before I leave. One of them is accomplishments that aren't on here. And then the third one is outstanding items, which is what you're talking about. So things that either I didn't get done that were on this list, or things that have come up that still need to be done. That could be the basis for, that you could include either with an acting or with an interim when you get to that point, depending on the item. So I'm working on those, but I'm not done yet.
I worry about overthinking this. I think we have overthought a lot of stuff in the past. This is the first cut, the first screen. We will have another opportunity. So tonight, I think we're looking for what I think is just the cream of the crop.
Right.
And that then we can go in and do further refinement through our questions in terms of understanding what they can bring. But if we start overthinking this, we're just gonna end up going down rabbit holes. So.
Well, I mean, one of the other ways to do it too, it accomplishes the same thing, like I told you, is we can either have a discussion about everyone, or I can do a sheet and have all their names and give you each a different color pen and tell you you get 6 marks, about 6 people you wanna talk to, and at the end we see who gets how many marks.
Well, before we get into that, let me go back to the conversation to see if we all agree that it is likely that this internal person will be needed for almost a year. That assuming a new council is seated the first week in January, it's gonna take them a while to figure out, do they hire somebody, who do they hire? I mean, it took us 5 months-ish before we had our first person that we offered the job to, 5 or 6 months-ish. So we all agree that we're looking for somebody who can hang in there for that long, as opposed to making a change in January. Maybe that's a threshold question.
I can't speak for the next council. I mean,
Well, but we can set them up for hopefully success in that if we anticipate it's going to take that long, we find someone who's willing to commit to that long. There's one.
Yeah, reasonable. I mean, I fully expected 9 months. That was my floor.
As a minimum. And my guess it'll be a little bit less, could be 9, could be 12, somewhere in that range. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Does somebody have a different idea about how this is gonna go forward? And then our intention wouldn't be for the next council to have to hire another interim come January first. I mean, they could if they want to, but hopefully we set them up that they don't have to. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe you'll like your interim so much and they wanna stay, that it'll be really.
And that would be great. That would be great. And that might also be an intention, it is for me in my selection, that someone who might be willing to stay, could stay, have the qualifications, et cetera, that would be good too. But that's something the next council would decide if we set them up for that possibility. Okay? So let me make sure that we've covered the job responsibility issue enough for Susan. Are you comfortable? We've had enough conversation about that?
We've had a good conversation about it.
Okay. Anything else on
interims?
on the?
So we have, leave the job description as is and develop scope of work based on council direction. Ability to delegate quickly and effectively. Council drives policy, staff works on recommendations and execution. And then, I'm just putting random thoughts together, and then anticipate 9 to 12 month assignment based on a March, June 2020 hire.
So maybe let's take a look at what Leah gave us and see, are there other items that we would put on this list, or are there any on here you would say, nah, I don't think any of us should consider this? Are we all okay with the general direction that these items suggest?
Since I've spent hours doing this already, what I was least comfortable with is what appears to be a very high rating for being in Colorado. We've got knowledge of Colorado, lives in Colorado, and familiar with Manitou Springs. That's a potential of 30 points, which rates that incredibly high. So I was using a fairly convoluted method of weighting it myself. But anyway, so that was my only concern, but I've already done this, I've got my 16, 1 to 16 already.
So you're good with this, except for what you just mentioned in terms of the weighting of Colorado and attitude? Anybody else wanna weigh in on this?
Just to consider two additional items could be, management is distinct from leadership, where management would suggest, relative to the functions we have, what's the familiarity of the individual with those functions? Not that they would be the experts in it, but the familiarity, that would be the point.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Again.
We have leadership down, but
Yeah.
I believe in the highest level, one would say leadership and management, so I'm trying to highlight the management component, what's the most important. Now, I would suggest there might be two things. Familiarity with the functions, so what are the functions, public safety,
The department
works and so forth, yeah, just some idea in there.
Okay.
And then the other piece of management is really organization development, which breaks down at the individual level to performance plans, feedback, personal development plans, feedback. It's great we have the CPSHR is outsourced HR, which will have all the really good techniques, but line management ultimately has to be the muscle behind that.
Okay. And so adding a management component, which includes familiarity with department functions, organization development, performance planning, evaluation, and feedback.
And if I could, performance planning as well as personal development, which is different. What's your personal development plan versus what's your task for the city?
And I would, if I could, just say, those are great. However, we could do 50 things on here, and a lot of these things can be captured in the questions that we ask the finalists. And I caught a lot of what you asked there under the what significant accomplishments caught my attention. So it's just in the way I interpreted this. But you know, I don't know, I just keep getting concerned about overthinking and especially at this stage, but they're really good ones.
I have a compromise.
Okay.
You could take out lives in Colorado, because knowledge of Colorado, somebody could have had jobs here and moved somewhere else, replace those with one thoughts. So that's one. I agree that management and leadership can be very different, and that's, I think, why Bob was mentioning that. I agree that we have a whole lot of Colorado on here. Familiar with Manitou Springs could stand, and knowledge of Colorado could go in lieu of one of those others unless there was a strong take on the table that those didn't need to come out of there. Becky's been the one who I think has really driven us with familiar with Manitou Springs, so we want to take that one out. I agree with that. I think they really, that's been something that, since March, that's been an important thing for a number of us here.
It's about being local and also about the size of community. I don't think you can come from a huge community and necessarily manage a small community like Chief Rivera said. It's just incredibly different when you have a huge budget and a huge staff and you come to a small town and you have to do everything yourself.
So if we could take out 3 and 4 and replace them with Bob, would the two of you be, would all of you be in agreement that Bob and Nancy have 2 suggestions that might keep us from overthinking it, but put those issues there?
So, I'm good with that, Gary?
I'm good, I think we got enough now. We can discuss this all night at 27 and we'll be sitting here at
Okay.
we need to move on.
Fine.
Okay.
It's fun, I took this to be my own evaluation of where I'm gonna get my ABC group and not anybody else's, so.
Okay.
Just like she did her own little waiting maneuver, didn't anticipate us doing this. Maybe after we get an A group, more consensus on getting our A group, but not
So
initially.
you're good?
Yeah.
You're good? Good? Okay, so we've got a general criteria with some additions. We have an understanding that.
Where do we end up? Are we actually eliminating them? We leaving them alone for
Susan,
now?
Susan, well, we're leaving them alone.
Okay.
But, well, other than Susan's comment was we could easily take out some, but others have done their own work already. So to the extent you would like to incorporate these other factors, go forth. It sounds like we all agree they are important factors. We just didn't want to be that precise about these are the only 10.
Right.
Because some people may have had others. Does that work?
Okay. You can still get they look good. I'll consider those. I don't want those.
So, the question is there anything else before we move on to the acting, which I guess we're gonna do that in executive session. Appoint somebody as an acting, rather than appoint. We're gonna talk about those people in executive session.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
I didn't think so. I thought we were doing it in this session, but that's okay. However you wanna do it, Mr. Mayor.
Is there more than one person that we're gonna talk about?
There's one.
There's one person to talk about.
There's one person.
And Leah, you put out a recommendation to
I did.
council. And, well, myself personally, I thought your recommendation was excellent and attributes you mentioned were spot on.
Okay.
So, unless we need to have a conversation that addresses personnel issues,
Right.
a particular person, if council is okay with moving forward with Leah's recommendation, do you want to make that known?
Sure. Well, as you know, I was directed at the last council meeting, to go back, or maybe it was the meeting before that, to go back and talk to staff about acting. Remember, within acting, we're just looking at somebody that would be coming internally. I mean, we're not looking at going out and doing recruitment like we would with an interim or a regular position. And somebody who would be interested in doing it, serving in that capacity. And also I got some feedback from Bob and from others about the role that other staff, particularly Alicia, might play in trying to assist that acting. I had a volunteer, it's Mr. Roy Cheney, he's here tonight, the aquatics director, who has agreed that this would be a positive thing for him to try. He's talked with his family, so we won't have any surprises with that. And I would recommend He talked with me months before this acting thing even came up about an interest in maybe expanding his horizons with this assignment. He's developed an excellent team where he's at. I think he will have all the assistance. I have at least one I know head nod over here, but I have, we've talked at staff meetings about people stepping up and willing to assist Mr. Cheney. He did, I think, mention at the last council meeting that he has a strong staff and feels that with minimum assistance on his part, that he can bring them up to a level that they can take on the rec center and everything that needs to happen there. So it will be minimally, I guess, distracting for him while he's taking on this responsibility. And so I would recommend for staff, for Roy and for the city that we offer the acting position to Mr. Cheney with the notion that he would stay in that position until such time as you actually select a formal interim. And at least at this point, he's expressed an interest in the interim as well. And so we'll see how that goes after he's been in there for a little while. But that means that we would probably need to conduct that interim selection process a little separately than it's been handled with me, because he might be part of the pool.
And do you want to take the next sentence about your role in that?
Oh, yes. And so.
And so.
You guys give me all this nice stuff, and then I say, I'm not really going anywhere. No, I've actually talked with a PERA rep about a week ago, and if I'm not interested in staying through December or next June, my husband says he misses me. But I do want Roy to be successful, and I do want you all to get somebody in here that's good. And given that potential conflict with Roy, and also the fact that there's a few items that I'm not going to quite get finished and want to be helpful, CPS HR has agreed to bring me on, and I can help on an hourly basis as part of their contract to do some of these, just do some of these closure things. So I can help with, you know, the questions, and with Alicia I can help set up the interviews, and we can do some of that stuff just on a project basis. So I wouldn't be here 3 days a week anymore or anything. It's just kind of on an as needed basis. And I might not get dressed up either.
So
no.
Any questions? We're not going to
Which
do that.
and I'm hoping everybody's okay with that, because my goal is to really help Roy be successful through this process, and also get you all moving along and get these interviews started. I'm figuring, I know people are anxious, but we're coming up on the 4th of July holiday. People have plans. Depending on how far we get with this, I'm thinking we couldn't do interim interviews until probably July. And so you might, depending upon who you got, if it's somebody local, they might be able to start August 1. Otherwise, it might be, you know, end of August, September, something like that.
So everybody, okay, we're not going to approve that because we're in a work session?
That's right.
We will go into a special meeting in a moment. When we come out of that special meeting, we will then take some action on that appointment. And someone remind me to do that before we adjourn. So that's just the sequence, unless people have questions now for Roy or Leah in terms of how that would lay out. Okay? All right. So.
Do we have to move to go into an executive session?
Well, we're going to finish the work session first. And then we're going to adjourn the work session, and we'll open a special meeting, and then we'll get into an executive session. So, but anything else on this topic before we move on to item 6, discussion of emergency?
So, my question is he gonna, where this is gonna go, will we start immediately working with him?
Yes.
That would be the plan.
And Leah
whether I have a contract or not. So
Yeah.
I've already agreed to that.
You guys can talk while you're swimming, do all that kind of thing.
All of the above.
We text all the time, actually.
In the water.
Right. In the water. I have a new iPhone, so it works in the water.
Any other question before we move on to the next item, which is item D? All right. We'll move on to item D, City Administrator Report.
Oh, I have lots of stuff. Looking at my list. Okay, I probably have more, but, new budget software. Nicole Ortega in the finance department did a lot of research. One of the things we were finding is that it wasn't just, Cassell is not really user-friendly for budgeting. And then one of the things that happened is every time there were last-minute changes, which happened specifically last year, in that we were reducing budgets at the last minute, we were doing lots of things. It is, from what I understand, because I haven't been through the process before, but from the people that have participated, it is a huge effort to go through, and it's almost like recreating a budget book every time you make these changes. So Nicole went out, did analysis of several, I think at least 3 or 4 different software, and came up with an actual matrix. And so we're in the process of implementing next week, really, this week. Is it tomorrow? Or next week?
We're meeting with them this
Yeah.
week.
It's going to allow at the staff level to do a lot of the entry that actually had to be done just by finance. And then it's going to allow us to automate a budget book that you can go in and make one correction and the whole book kind of fixes itself instead of having to redo everything. And so I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a much more positive experience for you all through the retreat process, and it's going to be a much more positive experience for staff, putting information in, going through that process. So I'm actually really encouraged. And although that wasn't a specific recommendation out of the CLA report, I think overall improvements in the budget process were, and this is really key. So I wanted to let you all know that's happening. Secondly, I've gotten I've received from Becca an updated schedule of some of the recommendations and where we are. I can make this available to you all. She gave it to me today, so I haven't sent it out, but some of the recommendations that came from the Clifton Larson Anderson, looking at the schedule of federal awards, the pension liability reporting, cash controls, monthly financial reporting, and leadership. Becca signed up for leadership and communication classes at Pikes Peak Community College beginning in the fall.
Well, I will sign up.
Or you will signing up, yeah.
I don't have a class schedule out yet.
Right. The schedule of federal awards, Crystal has created the schedule, and Nicole is going to perform the first review, and then Becca will perform the final, which is one of the recommendations is to get Becca more in the review process, Crystal more in the doing, and Nicole in the doing part of it. That's done. We have Clifton Larson worked with us on getting the calculation for the pension liability reporting, so that's done. Cash controls, as you remember, there were a couple of suggestions with regard to how Amanda and Joyce handled money. That's been addressed by bringing Nicole in so that we have a different person who's actually going to be reconciling the cash drawer every week. Monthly financial reporting. They're getting the new budget financial software again, like we talked about. So anyway, I just wanted, I can make this available to you. I don't need to read the whole thing. But we're moving forward on the recommendations. And staff is pretty darn excited about the changes that we're making, and I'm excited for them. And so I think that this process, this budgeting process, and making it easier for our staff outside of finance to actually input and get information in there is going to be really key.
Will Cassell, you'll start using it? Or?
We will, and the software talks to Cassell. So we'll be able, one of the things we're trying to do is also have Cassell and Excel work more closely together, so we can export Cassell stuff to a spreadsheet instead of having to actually create a new one in Excel, which gives a lot of opportunity for transpose numbers and things along those lines. So,
did you
yes.
figure out a way to automate the time sheets and time entry?
Not yet. Payroll is a whole nother thing, and I need Cassell to come in. That's really what needs to happen.
What about the public facing? We had looked at, or I think we had
This-
balancing act is this.
Talk at the microphone so everybody can hear.
Okay, so this budgeting software is from OpenGov, and it does have a transparency, community engagement component, and it is much more robust than.
And that was
And
actually
it
one
integrates-
of the
and it
pieces that we
integrates
looked
with the
at.
other software that we have.
Right, yes.
I've seen the open governance.
Really? Okay, I did talk, I think I sent you an email about it. Obviously, no decisions today, but I did want, I've been looking at the assistant to the city administrator position. Bob, you made a suggestion last week about use of Alicia. There was actually a recommendation 2 years ago to have her being looked at for the assistant job. As we look at this, it's a little different than a deputy, it's assistant too. But a lot of the work that she's doing already really fits in that job description. So I really kind of want to leave that in your mind about her role, whether it would be helping Roy, whether it would be helping the new interim. She's much more than an executive assistant when it comes, and I would see her moving more in that role. There's other things that we can do. It's been a little difficult for us the last couple of months because of Megan's being out on maternity leave, and she's taken on all the events work and done an absolutely outstanding job, of which I have recommended her for a spot award, which she'll get on Thursday. So I would like to move forward with that, if there isn't really a strong objection.
Do we have a written job description?
Yes, I have it, and I can send it to you.
No, I don't think so. Dave Waters, Dave was the deputy city administrator.
Yeah, but I think it started as an assistant
It
too.
was never deputy. We created that as a new position.
I don't know the history, but there is one called assistant too, and I have it.
Well, yeah, that was supposed to be deputy, actually. His job was supposed to be deputy, but the current city administrator didn't like that wording, so he changed it to.
Well, and I think assistant two works great in this case.
So is assistant two also the administrative assistant? Who is the admin? Is she gonna do the administrative work?
Some of
as
it,
well?
probably not all of it.
Mhm.
We'll have to figure out how that works.
Do we have it in the budget still? I mean, that's my memory.
We have overall, you know, the other thing that I've asked, that I talked to you all about was the compensation adjustment recommendations, the stuff that CPS HR did. That was another item where they took a look. I mean, we have some ranges right now in our salary schedule that by the first of the year are going to be below minimum wage, which we can't have. And so CPS HR went out and did a salary review, and have made recommendations of anywhere from 2 to 5%, that we would do this mid-year, which would be about $43,000, which we think that we can actually, address just through our vacancies, the money that we've saved to date through the first 6 months of the year, because we didn't have positions.
Will that be for a select few, or that will?
I don't think it's for everybody, but it varies by the type, by the position. There were greater ranges with some positions because they were more out of alignment than others. Because remember, we haven't looked at any salary adjustments. We did do merit pay, but we did not look at any salary adjustments in the schedule for 2 years. You have an 18 one that was done in 17. That's my understanding.
I would like to go back to Ken's point, the
Okay.
assistant to the executive or whatever.
Assistant to the city administrator.
The city administrator.
Right.
Yeah. That, if memory serves me, we converted that to a deputy position last year, and then we're using part of that deputy funding to pay for Laura Newman.
Yes.
So I think we need to, and I could be wrong in my recollection, but we did do some maneuverings in the last budget that Becca would recall better.
Okay.
So I think, we need to just look at what our options really are and,
There was one that was like assistant city administrator, and then there was one that was assistant to the city administrator, which was more of a break between a combination of the administrative side and also taking on some of the responsibilities to help with the city administrator job.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm very familiar with that.
Okay.
Are you envisioning this assistant would take the place of a deputy, or in addition
Could.
to a deputy?
Could take the place.
really depends upon the skill of the city administrator who might be able to be, you know, self-manage their schedule, things like that. It just really depends.
Right.
They need Excel spreadsheet, for special analysts, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I've talked with Megan, for example, about, you know, she's looking at, you know, going back to 30 hours per week, which is what she was originally hired for, but she's also very open to managing all the social media piece, which is a lot of what she and Alicia have shared, and if she takes primary over that, that'll free up some more time for Alicia as well. So there's a lot of process improvements that I think we can make once we're all kind of back on this page, in order to make some of this stuff work.
So my only concern was I agree with Nancy's recollection. I thought we did away with that position and created a deputy position.
Okay.
And so that's my recollection, which is why logistically, I don't know how we're gonna make this work. And that's my only reservation about it, is logistically, but also, how do we go forward with acting interim permanent deputy, and then we have an assistant who we're putting in place now. So I'm having just issues with not the person,
No, I got
the position, and the budget.
But what I would say is that, I don't dispute, and that's why in earlier discussions, since I've been here, when we've had people that seem like they might be good candidates, and you all, I think, have known about some of those, that I was reluctant to do that, and I think we missed some opportunities in terms of providing the kind of smooth transition. And although I know that this position is really critical to the city administrator, I would tell you to a large extent, it's no different than anybody else coming into any other job that already has staff there. That already has a finance director, a planning director, an aquatics director, you know, I mean, you just figure it out. And so, you know, I mean, to me, the loss has been greater than the concern about whether this would work or not. So, I don't, you know, obviously I'm not asking you to make a decision.
Right,
But I do think that it would help smooth the transition, that it's probably a better reflection of what she has been doing than what her current job description says. And I think that it would actually help moving forward to have that kind of stability. And I guess I don't see as much of a downside specifically.
So from my perspective, I don't know what you're asking in terms of input. If you're asking input about whether we should do that for me, I would wanna see a job description.
Okay.
And if you're asking input, and you don't have to,
I know.
about a particular person, I'd like to see the background.
Okay.
I don't know anything
Here's-
about
here's-
this,
here-
but
here-
you don't have to.
No, I don't have to, but here's the deal, is, you know, I mean, it's like I said last time, you know, I mean, I could just hire a deputy, but that doesn't seem like a smart thing to do 3 days before I'm leaving. And it doesn't seem like I'm setting the right person up, that I'm setting people up for success. So although I don't need to get a show of hands, and certainly in a work session, that's not appropriate anyway, I guess I wanna know what else you would need. So, and I heard job description, I have a resume, I mean, I can show you lots of things, I can write up more things that explain why I wanna do this. I haven't had a chance to do that because I was busy with other things, specifically Cora requests. So, and others, and so I'll get there, but I'd like to set this up to be successful, and I wanna make sure that I know what it is that you'd like.
So let me ask.
To consider it.
Would you consider as part of your project work for us to help us finalize this role
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Can't finalize it tonight.
Okay.
You've heard a little bit of conversation, but would you consider taking that on?
Yes.
To say that we finalize this position and make
Right.
some decisions in the next week or two
Yeah.
concerning it? Does
Would
that
you all be okay with that?
make sense?
So I can provide, job descriptions and highlight some differences between, like, you know, what the current one is and what I'm anticipating, and a resume, and then maybe, some more detail around why I think it's a good thing to do.
And I'd like to also see the administrative assistants.
Right, that's what I mean.
I don't mean the admin, the executive.
Right, I'm talking about the current position
Yes.
and the one I wanted to go to.
Exactly.
Right,
There you go.
okay.
You know, do some research around the budget issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can to see, but here's the other thing is, you know, I mean, granted, I mean, I would think, here's my envisioning, and I'll write this up. But my envision would be that if I get an assistant too, I don't need a deputy. And so I'm looking at just doing a reclass, and Gary will appreciate this, I'm looking at a reclassification based upon the work that's being done or I anticipate being done. And so I lose the executive position, and I gain this, and so it's an incremental difference. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll write that up too, but that's what I see.
Anybody else need any other information from Leah on that topic? She'll come back to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've run long.
On that topic.
I just think we need to see the impact in the long term on the budget, because we tend to, and no disrespect, but we tend to look at cost savings through, you know, current year's budget, so we show that we're down this many staff.
Right.
But then if we ever get to
Fully
staffed, and then pretty soon we look at this number, can we afford that number?
Right.
So that's what concerns me.
All right, Leah, do you have other topics?
I have three more real quick. Property use agreement. I mentioned this last time, but I wanna mention it again, and I'm hoping to get in touch with, Mr. Corpenning's wife, who I'm sorry, I don't know her first name, Beth. I did approve and signed today, a property use agreement, which has to do with a gentleman named Julian Wasatsko, who, is from Colorado State University. He's a professor. He's actually recreating replication of a 1923 pollinator study, and he's going to be on Colorado Springs Utilities property, he's going to be on some Manitou Springs property, and he's going to be on Forest Service property. And over this summer, he's going to be collecting data on pollinators based upon this study that was done, so what is that, 97 years ago? 96 years ago? And he's promised that he will provide us the results of that study as well. He's already promised that he'll do that with utilities. So I'll be leaving all of his contact information, and I've asked for him if he might, if the pollinator group is interested, he will come in after he's been here for a little while and talk about what he's doing, what he's finding, and really doing an update. And so I'm pretty excited. It sounds like a pretty great project. And finally, I think there's been some emails around about these Cora requests. You just recently, internal Cora requests for some information. You should have received a couple of directions from Alicia tonight about what you all need to do through your personal emails and texts, etc. We're in the process of kind of negotiating exactly what's being requested, and that may change as of maybe tomorrow.
So do you want us to hold off?
No, I want you to go ahead and at least do the work, cause it's probably gonna take some time.
We only have until the 30th to get all these in, so some of us have a lot more emails from people than
Yes.
others.
Yes.
So who do we go to with technical questions? So.
I would say I would go to Randy
Randy.
Perkins.
So there's some programs that we could use, I don't know if they're free or not, that could help with that. But
And this is just the personal side, cause we're already working with RainCheck on the emails.
Here's an example. Here's my personal phone and it's got text. How do I get it out of here?
There's some programs that you can put on your computer, connect your phone to your computer, do some stuff, but if that app costs money, then the city needs to pay for it.
Who's gonna tell us that?
Right, nobody. So, I don't know, Jeff.
There's a little bit of direction in Alicia's email about doing a screenshot.
Oh, the screenshot, I got.
Alicia says basically just do screenshots of that, and I'm like, no, that's probably not the best way to go about it.
Okay.
Okay.
And then if you have iCloud, you might be able to do something with iCloud. I just started looking at that tonight a little bit.
Primarily it's, I think, on text messages.
Yeah.
Emails are easy.
Emails are easier.
Text messages, not so much.
But if you look at that latest one tonight from Jeff, read that.
I haven't read that.
On text messages?
Well, yeah, the whole
In
thing.
general, we did some general stuff, cause I asked him like, what the hell do I search for? What's,
Right.
yeah. And so he came back with some recommendations.
Okay.
But no specific thing like what you're asking, but that they might help you nonetheless.
So,
I'm sorry I can't be more helpful.
I'm still not
I
clear
discovered
on
tonight just
specific-
how much we didn't know about Cora requests. And I mean that because we have some people that are leading this effort that are typically not the ones driving, you know, getting the information, so we're all
I just
kind
need
of
someone
learning.
to tell me, how do I get a whole string
Yeah,
of text messages?
Yeah, I'll do some research. Probably not tonight, but tomorrow's busy.
We're all in
work.
the same boat, I imagine.
Yeah, at least I.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I have an app at home that does that, so.
Can export my text messages?
Yes.
Basically what I wanna do.
So I'll email you that
Yeah.
link and you can look into it and.
Okay, that'd be great.
Or you can email it to me, or
No,
email it
okay.
to all of council.
We're
Can
gonna,
you
we're gonna
just-
all need it.
Yeah, they're all gonna need it, so, yeah,
whatever
just email it
solution
to
we
all
come
of
up
them.
with, let's try to use the same solution and figure out it.
Just type in COU and it'll pop up and.
Okay, okay.
Okay, and the last one was the update on accomplishments, the responsibilities update, so, you know, we can talk about that. There's a number of them that are complete, there's some of them that are ongoing. I don't know if there's any that there's a couple of them that I didn't do anything on.
I don't think we all got that, Leah, so if you can email it.
Oh, you bet, I'm sorry, did I pass it, it didn't make it around here, you can have my copy.
Gary, did you get one?
Oh, I thought I passed them all around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she split them.
Did you not get
Split
one?
them in each
I
direction.
think everybody got one. All right,
Okay,
they shared.
but I'll send it out. Actually, when I went through this, yesterday was kind of interesting. I didn't realize I got so much done. So,
I'll take that copy. That may be
okay,
my copy.
but I know the finalize the Comcast agreement, that doesn't have anything in it, so I still need to update it. Right now, that has not been finalized, and I'm gonna have Jeff bring it back as another item, probably to be discussed in executive session next week for legal advice about how to move forward.
Okay, anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm done.
Council correspondence, what do we have? Nothing? 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 Bob?
Yes, I have something.
Okay.
This came out of the open space meeting last night, basically from Steve Snyder. CDOT apparently is taking, animal carcasses of animals that have been hit by cars and dumping them down a ravine on the south side of the highway, which means this is going to get into our waterway, or it has the potential of getting into our waterway. And he's like, you know, we gotta do something. And I was wondering, I had a thought, because normally, we don't feed the wildlife. I know the city used to put carcasses up at the boneyard. You remember that, Gary, and there was coyote, I mean, we had a huge coyote pack up there for the longest time. I mean, more than 14 animals is a big pack. And I thought, oh yeah, you can't feed the wildlife. And then I started thinking, we have such a depleted environment that maybe we should consider that. And talk to CDOT and ask them to place it somewhere else that might benefit, maybe even spreading it out might benefit wildlife. Cause it's pretty deplete wildlife. And so, but regardless of that aspect, they shouldn't keep doing that, because anytime it's in a ravine, it's going right into the water system. Every time it rains, we've got a lot of rain.
Are you sure they're doing that?
Pardon?
Are you sure they're doing that?
Well, I haven't seen it, but I trust Steve Snyder. I mean,
Maybe you could find the location specifically.
Right.
Where
I
that
have
is
it-
and.
I
see that.
actually had it.
Probably
Oh, no, I
Eventually
can't,
they would-
because it's,
They would contact the wolf refuge or they take them to the zoo.
So, anyway, we'll follow up on
I
that.
have
Anything
it
else?
here.
Wait, let's not get into the detail of it now. So, anything else on council?
no, not at the moment.
I have two issues, and we can obviously look into that. I was gonna say Leah can, but.
I can.
Roy can, or somebody can. Two issues. One, to confirm that we are still moving forward with a council retreat on July 17th.
Right.
I want to confirm that. I believe that Tammy Tenoy was available. If that's the case, we will need to move to figure out what we were gonna do with her. Create some 6-month goals, talk about how we're gonna operate, shared values and process, other, whatever. So put that together, or how you would suggest we do put that together, if we want to move forward with that on the 17th. That was kind of a question.
Participate fully.
They're thinking.
And, you know, originally, I don't think it fits anymore, but originally we talked about using that time for goals to actually use as the basis for key performance indicators moving forward, so that all the work that department heads had done already, we could tie that back to overall organizational goals and make sure that they were tracking the right things that were gonna help move us forward. I'm not sure that that's still the right direction.
I would say that at this point, it's probably not, the best use of our time to work on KPIs. I would say that the most valuable use, if we go through with it, the most valuable use of our time would be to lay out our priorities for the next, 6 months and try to stick to them. Or through the end of this council.
And I would preface that by just confirming how we're gonna work together, how we're gonna make this fun, how we're gonna, really try to use the best of our time, both in terms of the way we do it and the what we do. So I have a little bit of discussion about that as well.
I would do that.
Everybody wanna go forward with that?
Set priorities for the next 6 months. Don't forget to have fun.
Present support to say.
Okay, so does anybody wanna work with Tammy? How do we wanna put this together? Roy can help with that, presumably?
Yes.
I'd work with Roy on it. That's all right.
Sure.
Unless someone else wants to, then that's perfectly fine. I'm not doing it. I got plenty to do.
I'm perfectly great to nominate you.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, well.
If you have specific suggestions, I think we've talked about in general, it will be about how we're gonna operate and what we're gonna do, primarily just over the next 6 months. I think is what we're talking about. Everybody, so the agenda really wouldn't be much more than that, but flushing that out. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Second thing was, just to confirm that July 31st is the 5th Tuesday, and to confirm that unless somebody sees a need to meet, that we would not be meeting there. Unless somebody changes that.
I'll be out of town anyway.
I'm out of town.
You're out of town. Okay, anybody insist that we meet on July 31st? 30th, excuse me.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, so we will not
No
be,
meeting.
no meeting on July 30th. Great. That's what I have. Anything else?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanna reiterate again that the Pac-Man, bike ride, the mayor's ride is this Thursday, 5 o'clock. We're leaving from, the Buffalo Bicycle Lodge, going up to Serpentine and coming back down. There will be, e-bikes available.
We're leaving at 5:30.
We're physically leaving at 5:30, meeting there at 5 to do waivers and so on. And Babu's, who we just approved a license on not long ago, he has offered tea to people on the way back, so it's an opportunity to coordinate with some local business as well. And also on July 10th at, what time, Natalie? 5 at the Manitou Art Center, we are doing a community
I have it
meeting.
6 to 7:30.
6 to 7:30, thank you. Manitou Art Center to look at options for the COG artifacts, COG Carson or COG artifacts, get more input on that, so.
That's on my list of outstanding items.
Okay.
And also, just as a quick announcement, tomorrow night is the library. There's a meeting about the library here at City Hall at, anybody know? How much? 6 o'clock tomorrow night. Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, we'll adjourn the work session, and we will call to order the special meeting of Manitou Springs City Council, June 25th, 2019, at 9:04 p.m.
Hold on, I gotta click us out, click us back in.
All right, you want me to start all over when you click us back in?
Yeah.
It's adjourned, last meeting.
Okay.
Let me know when you're ready to
We're
go.
off, so hold on.
All right.
You're already adjourned, so.
Well, I need to call to order on the record.
Okay, so now you call to order.
All right. We'll call the June 25th 2019, special meeting of the Natchez Springs City Council to order at 9:05 p.m. Roll call, Councilman Smith. Here. Councilman Todd. Councilman Todd. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. Present. Mayor Perez present. Councilwoman Elder. Here. Councilwoman Wolbrook. Here. Councilman Moore. Here. Would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. I would ask, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this, if we could add an item after the executive session to approve the appointment of an acting city administrator. I believe we need to have that as an agenda item. If someone wouldn't mind amending the motion, I meant to say that first, amend the motion so that we can add that as an agenda item.
Might we approve that in open session now so Roy can join us in this executive session discussion?
He can't.
I can't because he wants to be candidate, I'm sorry about that.
We can do it in any order, but we just need to add it to the agenda.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to add appointment of the acting city administrator.
So moved. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote, raise your hand. All in favor, all opposed, motion passes unanimously. One other item that maybe we need to add to the agenda, and that is approval of a contract with Leah Ash to assist us through CPSHR. The question is whether we need to do that tonight as well.
Can't Leah just do that herself, or is that
Well, no, she
conflict of
can't,
interest?
yeah, she can't do that herself.
No,
Through
and
the
I
contract.
have to, they need a bunch of information
Boyd
for
could do
me.
that.
Or to do it.
So we could do it that way, and I'm fine. I just wanna make sure it gets done.
Okay.
Okay, so.
They're waiting on some stuff for me before they can add me in.
All right, so we will do that later. And we are in open session, and so, first item would be consideration of appointment of Roy Cheney as acting city administrator.
I'll make a motion that we approve Roy Cheney as acting city administrator effective
Friday, Thursday.
28th.
28th.
Friday.
We'll put him in there, put him in there tomorrow.
Could.
I'd say put him in tomorrow.
Come on down, Roy.
Okay, tomorrow.
I would say acting on Friday, he can be up there tomorrow, but we don't need to.
We probably don't
enter
wanna
in
have an acting and an interim. Little confusing. Who's in charge?
Well, I think that's just, we could say, okay, Friday.
She's in charge.
Right.
Starting Friday.
All right.
With his learning process starting tomorrow.
There you go. All right.
I just wanna know if he has pants.
I knew that was gonna be a question.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. As part of the discussion, did you clarify what the policy is in terms of?
I did, and it's either 10%, in fact, it was a resolution that you all passed. It wasn't an ordinance, cause I had trouble finding it, but it was a resolution, and it's either 10% increase over his existing salary, or entry level of the position, the minimum entry level, whichever is greater, is the way that it reads.
Okay, so we have a
So
policy, we don't need to deal with that.
So we don't have to deal with the
Great.
starting salary.
That was my question. Any other questions, any other comments? If not, do we have a motion?
We did, Smith,
We have a
Smith
motion
and
and a
Beckett,
second.
so now you need to vote.
All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
for all
Thank you,
on
Roy.
board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, congratulations.
I'll be here, I'll be here. Okay, thanks.
All right, item D, executive session, we'll entertain a motion concerning the executive session.
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to section 5.1D of the Natchez Springs City Charter to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators concerning hiring an interim city administrator.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? If not, raise your hand affirmatively. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we are in an
Who
executive
seconded it, Smith?
session.
Gary, did you
Yes.
second it?
We do need to turn the video off,
We
please.
do. I think I have to do it over here. Oh, they lost the connection anyway.
So, what do you guys think of trying to get out of here by 10 o'clock?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying we should stay if we're done, but not to try to go over
Well,
time.
I just wanted to add one thing, that I think that right now, by what we did tonight, we've given us a little bit of opportunity where we're not rushing into something, and we can make this decision, even if we're not done, we need to just say we gotta cut off at 10, move on, because my feelings are that at least we'll give him the opportunity to see if he's going to excel, and we make him in excel, and we're not gonna have to rush into anything at this point. That's my opinion.
Okay. Alright, so if everybody agrees, we're gonna try. Why are we doing that? Nothing changed. Anyway, okay, so we're gonna try to get out of here, at 10 o'clock or before, is what it sounds like. Leah, are videos off?
I turned this off, let me go make sure this one's off, cause it's still red, so.
Our video should be off and our audio should be on.
Our audio's on, I haven't touched it.
So, based upon what Leah described earlier, I think the task is to try to divide these up into 3 categories.